Chapter 1705. A cultivator family in the south of Meng country? Xiaohua's brows slightly wrinkled as he secretly muttered in his heart, "My Imperial Thunder Sect's ancient books have records of the Meng Empire. Not to mention the Meng Empire, even the other two countries have thousands of large and small cultivator families, perhaps even tens of thousands of cultivator families. It's just the south of the Meng Empire." "Senior Chang," Xiaohua cupped his hands and said with a smile, "I think that cultivator from that cultivator family also wants the Qian Mo secret stone. When I find it, I'll definitely go back and exchange it with them. So, this cultivator might not be unwilling to let me know his identity, right?" Chang Fian laughed and waved his hand. "I don't know if that cultivator is willing or not. Maybe he wants you to know. However, rules are rules. This old man cannot disobey them. Elder Hua cannot disobey them. Even the city lord of my humble city cannot disobey them. Otherwise, how can my Weeping Moon City establish itself among the 7 great cities of the country of Xi?" Xiaohua's expression turned serious. He bowed and said, "Thank you for teaching me, Senior Chang." "Good." Chang Fian's eyes flashed with surprise. He thought that this kid could be taught. He waved his hand and took out a stone-like jade charm. Then he handed it over and said, "This old man only wanted to meet you once. But who would have thought that little friend Jiang would have Ling Yichao? Now that I look at little friend Jiang again, your aptitude is really outstanding. This old man won't ask which sect you're from. This is a small favor that I'm returning to you. Please accept it." "What's this?" Xiaohua didn't think that the auction was a favor, but since Chang Fian said so, he had to accept it. When he took the jade talisman, he felt that it was slightly hot. This jade talisman was different from ordinary jade talismans. It was the size of a palm, more than twice the size of ordinary jade talismans. "Do you know about the auction in my Weeping Moon City?" Seeing Chang Fian's smiling eyes flashing with a hint of pride, Xiaohua shook his head and said, "Forgive me for being short-sighted. I don't know about this auction." You don't have to feel ashamed." Chang Fian laughed and said, "If you're not at the late stage of foundation establishment, you won't know about this auction. If you really know about it, how can this favor be counted as a favor?" Xiaohua understood and looked at the jade talisman in his hand. This jade talisman is the proof of participation in the secret auction. Chang Fian pointed with his hand and said, "Although I'm not in the late stage of foundation establishment, I can use my status as the lord of the auction to obtain this certificate. It's just that this old man has something to attend to in 10 days, so I won't be able to participate. It just so happens that little friend Jiang gave this old man some face during today's auction, so this old man will give this opportunity to little friend Jiang." Xiaohua panicked and said in a low voice, "Senior Chang, the people participating in the secret auction meeting are all late-stage foundation building cultivators, core formation seniors. Junior is only in the aura refining realm. I'm afraid it won't be good for me to go, right?" It doesn't matter. Who would know that you're in the chi refining stage? Don't worry and go. If you don't say anything and this old man doesn't say anything, who will know?" Chang Fian patted Xiaohua's shoulder and said with a mysterious smile, "Also, maybe there's an extremely good opportunity inside that will help you advance to the 12th layer of chi refining? In this secret auction meeting, things that you can't even imagine will often appear." Hearing this, Xiaohua's heart was slightly moved. That's right, core formation cultivators and foundation establishment cultivators were specially participating in this secret auction. Although Chang Fian didn't mention nascent soul cultivators, it was obvious that since others couldn't see through his cultivation, then other people's cultivation might also be in the nascent soul stage. How bad could the things that these almighty people used to exchange be? Fortunately, he had this 1,000-year-old Ling One grass. Otherwise, Chang Fian might not be able to give this jade talisman to him. If that's the case, then this junior won't be unreasonable. Many thanks for Senior Chang's kindness." Xiaohua immediately cupped his hands in thanks and put away the jade talisman. Chang Fian nodded and said with a smile, "I hope that your sect will participate in my Weeping Moon City's auctions more in the future. Next time, this old man will prepare more spiritual herbs. I hope that your sect will support me more." Xiao Hua secretly laughed and cupped his hands. This junior will definitely tell my sex master that this junior will take his leave. After watching Xiao Hua leave the small house, Chang Fian's expression changed and he hurriedly left. Xiao Hua's jade talisman to participate in the secret auction was just a small matter. What he needed to worry about was the matter of the flying sword. The Weeping Moon City's good plan was to sell the flying sword and make a profit. As for whether or not the flying sword belonged to the two missing sword cultivators, how would they know? Even if it was true, after the auction was over, the Weeping Moon City would be able to push all the blame away. Who would have thought that it would be a coincidence that Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao actually appeared in the auction? This flying sword really did belong to Zhang Yutong. If that was the case, then the matter would be troublesome. Chang Fian had no choice but to hurry out of the city to take care of the matter. He wanted to see if he could find the cultivator who sold the flying sword. Naturally, whether or not he could find him was unknown. The key was that he had to go to the Weeping Moon City to find him. Xiao Hua came out of the auction building and returned to his original appearance. He originally thought that Sun Shu and the others were waiting anxiously outside. But when he came out to take a look, he actually guessed half of it right. Although they were anxious, the only people waiting were Sun Shu and Qian Diheng. Kun Fian was not outside. "Io, junior brother Xiao, why did you only come out now?" As soon as Qian Diheng saw Xiao Hua, he shouted, "You only bid for some things, why are you so slow? Other people have already come out." "Hee, this little brother bid for a good thing. Senior Chang personally came to see us and invited us to participate in the auction next time. This little brother will now explain to senior brother Qian that whether or not we will come next time will be decided by senior brother and senior sister." Xiao Hua immediately told Qian Diheng about his promise to Chang Fian. Qian Diheng was very happy. He patted his shoulder and said, "If you bid for the flying sword at the end, senior Chang will meet you. This brother will also believe it. But there are many things at the beginning. Even if you bid for the expensive ones, you won't be able to bid for them. Believe it or not, it's up to you." Xiao Hua touched his nose and smiled. Then, he looked left and right and said curiously, "This little brother came out late. Why is senior sister Kuan even later than this little brother? I'm afraid that the last few magic tools were all won by senior sister Kuan." Qian Diheng looked at the sky with slanted eyes. The sky was pitch black and there were countless brilliant stars. He had a thoughtful expression on his face. After a while, he nodded deeply, eyes observation of the sky at night. "I'm afraid that's the case." Sun Shu at the side couldn't bear it anymore. He held his stomach and bent over, saying, "Junior brother Qian? I never thought that junior brother would be as interesting as junior brother Xiao. One is marked by the company one keeps. There's no other way." Qian Diheng spread his hands. This action seemed to be something Xiao Hua had done before. And yes, there's no other way. This time, Xiao Hua didn't touch his nose. Instead, he rubbed his nose very helplessly. With great difficulty, Sun Shu held back his laughter. With a crimson face, he looked at the entrance of the auction and said with a smile, "You still need to observe the sky at night? Senior sister Kuan is a disciple of the Heavenly Thunder Palace. It's only natural that she has some spirit stones in her storage bag. The magic tools in this auction are also pleasing to the eye. Winning one doesn't count for much. Ai, this young master is still a poor boy." Xiao Hua heard this and cried out in his heart. Thinking about the price of the last few magic tools, he sweated profusely. Since Sun Shu said so, needless to say, Qian Diheng also had a lot of spirit stones in his storage bag. No wonder this guy wants to go to that mysterious place to refine magic tools. Xiao Hua thought to himself. In the time it took to smoke half a cigarette, Kun Fian finally came out. Beside her was a middle-aged cultivator at the 11th level of qi refining. However, that cultivator didn't walk towards Xiao Hua and the others. Instead, he cupped his hands and bid farewell to Kun Fian. While he was at it, he glanced at Xiao Hua and the others before turning around and hurrying in another direction. Qian Diheng was obviously not as close to Kun Fian as he was to Xiao Hua. Looking at the back of that middle-aged cultivator, he asked with a strange voice, "Senior sister Kuan is in a good mood." I waited outside for senior sister and drank a lot of cold wind. Senior sister is actually chatting with a fellow cultivator you know in the auction. Kun Fian glared at Qian Diheng. Looking around, she said in a low voice, "This fellow cultivator is also someone I met occasionally when I was traveling in the past. I don't really know him well. However, just now, I got some things in the auction and bumped into him when I came out." "You just bumped into him for such a long time?" Qian Diheng curled his lips. "And I said something, so I was delayed." Kun Fian seemed to be thinking about the matter just now and was too lazy to care about Qian Diheng's attitude. Sun Shu and the others looked at each other, their eyes filled with curiosity. "Let's talk about it when we get back." Kun Fian seemed to have made a decision. She waved her hand and said, "This matter is very secretive and cannot be leaked." When they returned to the inn, the four people activated the restriction formation in the room. Only then did Kun Fian tell the whole story. It turned out that this middle-aged qi refining cultivator was called Changlan. He was a disciple of a cultivation family. Kun Fian had met him a few years ago when she went out with her senior sister to gain experience. They were looking for spiritual herbs together. He could be considered a reliable person. Today, he happened to meet Kun Fian in the auction and invited her to Jiangqing City to participate in a small e-fair. He also said that this e-fair would be attended by seniors of the Foundation establishment realm. At that time, there might be a condensed treasure. Condensed treasure? Xiao Hua was stunned. First, he thought of the jade slip that Zhen Qin gave him that recorded the understanding of breaking through the Foundation establishment realm. Then, he thought of the ancient books that he saw in the 8 great thunder palaces of the Imperial Thunder sect. He couldn't help but think to himself, such a precious thing can be exchanged? Alas, but that's not right. Xiao Hua thought of another layer. Qian Diheng and Sun Shu, who were at the side, were similarly stunned. Soon after, they were wild with joy, causing Xiao Hua to be baffled. Go, why not? Just for the condensed treasure, it's worth going. Qian Diheng agreed. And that Jiangqing City is close to the route that we planned to take previously. It won't be too far away. Sun Shu seconded. This? Xiao Hua said in a low voice, the condensed treasure is such a precious treasure. How could it appear in a small e-fair in Jiangqing City? Chapter 1706. He, junior brother Zhao's words are wrong. Qian Diheng said with a smile. I believe that Martial Uncle Helpless has already told junior brother Xiao about the condensed knowledge treasure? Xiao Hua shook his head and said, Master didn't say anything. He knew that junior brother was a loose cultivator and that it wasn't easy to reach Foundation establishment. He was also afraid that junior brother would be distracted, so he never mentioned the condensed knowledge treasure. But junior brother's big senior brother mentioned it when junior brother was chatting with junior brother. Then it should be so, Kun Fian said with a smile. Senior Xiang must have also thought about the condensed knowledge treasure before. But this condensed knowledge treasure is too rare. If Senior Xiang had such good fortune, I'm afraid that he wouldn't need to spend 50 years to reach Foundation establishment. Junior brother always felt that this was just a legend. The condensed knowledge treasure is condensed by Foundation establishment and even Aurus core stage cultivators using a special secret technique before they reach the end of their lifespan. Let's not talk about the success rate of this secret technique being extremely low, not even 1 out of 10,000 is left. Let's talk about the after effects of using this secret technique. Who would dare to blindly try it? Xiao Hua shook his head disapprovingly. What after effects? It's nothing more than becoming a mortal who has lost both his mind and cultivation, waiting for the end of his lifespan. Kun Fian said unconvinced. But if this condensed knowledge treasure is found by Senior's reincarnation again, he can immediately comprehend the comprehension within the condensed knowledge treasure. Although his cultivation may not be able to recover in the blink of an eye, but the realm of his Tao heart will immediately return to the realm he was in when he was alive. Xiao Hua was even more disdainful. Let's not talk about the condensed knowledge treasure's secret technique that every cultivator has a special soul imprint. Even the talk of reincarnation. I'm afraid there's no basis for it, but just as Xiao Hua said this, Xiao Hua's mind suddenly lit up, like a bolt of lightning flashing. Condensed knowledge treasure. However, if a reincarnated cultivator finds the condensed knowledge treasure that he left behind in his previous life, the realm of his Tao heart will immediately recover. He only needs to accumulate his cultivation. The various realms that he cultivated in his previous life would not encounter any bottlenecks. All realms would be like a flat land. I have cultivated till today, I have never encountered any bottlenecks. Could it be that I am also the reincarnation of a cultivator? A bone-chilling feeling arose spontaneously. Even if that's not the case, since I won't encounter any bottlenecks in my cultivation, then the matter of the condensing treasure is most likely true. Xiaohua immediately felt that his smile, when he saw the matter of the condensing treasure, was really superficial. Seeing Xiaohua's face suddenly change, Sun Shu asked in concern, "Junior brother Xiao, what's wrong?" Junior brother Xiao must have thought of something and felt that he had no reason to refute it, right? Qian Diheng smiled and said to Xiaohua, "Junior brother Xiao joined my Imperial Thunder sect halfway, so I'm afraid you don't know some of the sect's secrets." Then, she glanced at Sun Shu and said mysteriously, "I presume senior sister Sun has something to say?" "Yes, the matter of the condensed treasure is indeed true." Sun Shu's face froze and nodded. "Since we came out together with junior brother Xiao, there are some things that can be said. Let's be frank and honest. Junior brother Xiao, 2,000 years ago, there was a senior in my Imperial Thunder sect. I don't dare to mention his name. Because his nascent soul was not formed, he destroyed his own golden core and luckily used a secret technique to refine the condensing treasure. And, dozens of years later, this senior once again coincidentally entered my Imperial Thunder sect as a loose cultivator and obtained the condensing treasure that he refined himself. Now, he is already a demigod existence." Hiss, Xiaohua took a deep breath and looked at Sun Shu with an inconceivable expression. He muttered, There really is such a thing. All of this, isn't it too much of a coincidence?" "That's right, how is it just a coincidence? This is simply heaven's will." Kun Fei Yan's face was full of longing. This senior was a female in his previous life, but in this life, he became a male. Not to mention entering my Imperial Thunder sect, he even obtained the condensing treasure hidden in my Imperial Thunder sect. If this isn't heaven's will, then what is? Yes, it's simply inconceivable. Sun Shu looked at Xiaohua with a pair of beautiful eyes. Talking about the previous life, talking about reincarnation, naturally, it's also true. This senior recalled the events of his previous life? Xiaohua's heart thumped as he asked anxiously. A trace of affection flashed across Sun Shu's eyes as she said with a smile, "How is that possible? The condensing treasure is merely the comprehension of cultivation. How can the memories of the previous life be left behind? Sigh, if one could know the events of the previous life, wouldn't this world be in chaos? Previous life, present life, and future life. These three lives are the world's most mysterious Tao of life and death. That condensing treasure can't even condense a trace of heavenly Tao, so how can it leave behind memories?" Qian Diheng said in a low voice. "Tao of life and death? Heavenly Tao?" Xiaohua was slightly shocked. His eyes swiveled and he cupped his hands, saying, "Senior brother Qian, truly wise. This little brother has never heard of these before. I'm just making things up, Qian Diheng said with a mischievous smile, "This is all from when the Heavenly Thunder Palace's Grand Master was chatting. This little brother eavesdropped. This little brother is ridiculing himself. Senior brother Qian, you know that this little brother is a loose cultivator and have never heard of this kind of thing before. Yet you still bring it out to entice this little brother?" Xiaohua said with a smile that was not a smile. "All right, this little brother also doesn't understand. Don't laugh at me." Qian Diheng looked at Sun Shu and Kun Fei Yan and said, "It is said that this world has 3,000 great Taos. The leading great Tao is the Tao of life and death. Next is the Tao of karma. After that is yin-yang, samsara, stars, 5 elements, 8 trigrams, and so on. The power of these great Taos are different, but as long as one can cultivate one can cultivate to become an immortal, become a god, and enjoy eternal happiness and longevity, Qian Diheng's eloquence was extremely good. When he first started speaking, Xiaohua's mouth and tongue were dry and his mind was filled with fascination. But as he listened, Xiaohua felt that something was wrong. Qian Diheng was going further and further away, similar to the storytellers of the secular world. Cough, senior brother Qian? Xiaohua could not help but interrupt the talkative Qian Diheng. Why is the great Tao 3,000 and not 5,000? Or is it 3,001? Don't disturb me, Qian Diheng said impatiently. 3,000 great Taos is a collective name. It will eventually become the heavenly Tao, but there are many ways to describe it. No. Kun Fei Yen shouted. Earth Thunder Palace's ancestors said that this world has 3,000 great Taos, not one more, not one less. Or else why would there be the saying, weak water 3,000, only one scoop? In this world, there are only 3,000 people who can become saints and ancestors. How is that possible? Qian Diheng snorted and said, then according to Earth Thunder Palace's ancestor, there are only 3,000 people who can become immortals? Even if they become gods, there are only 3,000? Kun Fei Yen was speechless. He only shouted, that's what ancestor said. Why don't you talk about the great Taos outside the 3,000 great Taos? But I can't even explain the 3,000 great Taos clearly. How do I know what's outside the 3,000 great Taos? Qian Diheng waved his hand and said. Chapter 1707. Seeing Qian Diheng and Kun Fian quarreling, Xiaohua secretly laughed and said enviously, having a background is really good. I just heard about this condensed knowledge treasure. Who knew that they already knew about the 3,000 great Taos? Can't compare. When the two of them shut up, Xiaohua smiled and said, little brother still has a question. I wonder if senior brother Qian or senior sister Kun can solve it? Find senior sister Sun. The two of them said at the same time. Senior sister Sun, little brother believes that there is a condensed knowledge treasure, but if a condensed knowledge treasure refined by a spirit severing stage senior is found by his descendant, wouldn't he suddenly reach the spirit severing stage? Xiaohua asked. Sun Shu smiled and said, didn't junior brother Qian just say? A condensed knowledge treasure can't condense a trace of the heavenly Tao. Our qi refinement, foundation establishment and nascent soul all have to give birth to the child of the heavenly Tao, nascent soul. This nascent soul is the crystallization of heaven and earth's spiritual qi, and nascent soul contains the heavenly Tao. Starting from the nascent soul stage, all comprehension would contain a trace of the heavenly Tao. Thus, it was impossible to refine the heavenly Tao into the condensed knowledge treasure. Therefore, there is no condensed knowledge treasure refined by a spirit severing stage senior. Oh, so it's like this. Xiaohua nodded and had a trace of understanding. Then, what is the condensed knowledge treasure refined from? I don't know about this. Qian Diheng smiled and said, I am still young and have never thought about it. And it is said that the materials required are extremely rare, even my Imperial Thunder sect. I'm afraid we don't have it. Seeing that the three of them had some hope and enthusiasm in their eyes, Xiaohua suddenly realized and pointed at the three of them, saying, could it be, you all think that this condensed knowledge treasure was left behind by you in your previous life? What do you think? Qian Diheng and the other two said in unison, maybe it was left behind by you in your previous life. Xiaohua smiled bitterly, I understand. If anyone knows about this thing, they will definitely try their luck. Even if it isn't, what's wrong with it? Yes, what if it is? Kun Fian smiled and said, that would be great. But the fellow Taoist that senior sister Kun knows is merely a disciple of a cultivator clan. Is this news reliable? Sun Shu was somewhat doubtful. Who cares? Qian Diheng said disdainfully, love isn't it? Since we have to go there anyway, we'll just take a small detour to take a look. Even if he didn't, it would be good to exchange for something else. Alas, I didn't get any benefits from today's auction. That flying sword might really be Zhang Yutong's. My goodness, it looks really tempting. When will the meeting be held? Should we hurry over now? Sun Shu urged. Kun Fian smiled. 2 months later, there is no rush. If we use the teleportation array in Weeping Moon City, we should be able to arrive there in half a month. As soon as Qian Diheng heard this, he hurriedly winked at Xiao Hua and said anxiously, "Don't worry." And indeed, don't worry. All of you have obtained good things, but this little brother is still empty-handed. These few days, this little brother will walk around the Chiua city and see if I can find anything. That's true. There are still 2 months left. Let's wait a few days before we leave. Xiao Hua also agreed. You too? Sun Shu and Kun Fian looked at the two of them strangely and then smiled. Is there something fishy? No. Xiao Hua and Qian Diheng shook their heads firmly at the same time. Between cultivators, there were naturally secrets. Sun Shu and Kun Fian also knew about it. Only because the 4 of them were traveling together and were fellow disciples of the same sect, they asked a little. Seeing the 2 of them deny it, the other 2 naturally wouldn't say anything more. When Xiao Hua was in Luan's shop, he had the opportunity to ask about the location of the weapon refiner, but because of his identity, he was afraid of arousing Luan Qing or Luan Han's suspicion, so he didn't ask. At this time, he could only wait for Qian Diheng's arrangement. Moreover, when he came back last night, Xiao Hua had already thought of the mistake in his whereabouts. When the 4 of them decided to stay, he suggested to find another inn. Qian Diheng and the others naturally didn't have any objections. The next day, the 4 of them changed to another inn that was far away. After entering their respective rooms, Qian Diheng quietly went out. Sun Shu and Kun Fian acted as if they didn't know. The 2 of them agreed to go out, presumably to buy yellow talismans, pills and other things, but Xiao Hua declined and stayed in the room alone. First, he took out the talisman that Chang Fian gave him and carefully looked at it. The talisman was very simple. It was a place, a time, and a sentence. There were no other words. Should I go or not? Xiao Hua was a little hesitant. To be honest, facing senior cultivators who could kill him with a raise of their hand, Xiao Hua's heart was really nervous. That feeling of no safety made him feel uncomfortable. Forget it, I'd better not go. Xiao Hua clapped his hand and stored it into the space, thinking, the things that Foundation Establishment and Golden Core cultivators want to secretly exchange, if not magic weapons, then it's top-quality pills. It's definitely not something that I can use now. Why should I go? If I encounter something that I like, I don't have enough spirit stones to exchange. Just look at that flying sword. If I don't take out thousands of years old, 10,000 years old spirit grass, I definitely can't exchange it. And these are all things that make others envious. I'm just Qi refining stage 12, even if I can kill Foundation Establishment initial stage cultivators, but in the eyes of old monsters who have cultivated for hundreds of years, I'm just a baby. Don't show off your wealth. I'd better wait until my cultivation is higher. Soon after, Xiao Hua took out Luan Qing's jade slip and immersed his divine sense into it, slowly comprehending the Luan family's so-called ascending flame of fire art. This ascending flame of fire art was also strange. It was completely different from the fire art of the Samadhi True Fire. The fire art of the Samadhi True Fire taught about how to create the Samadhi True Fire, while the ascending flame of fire art taught about how to cultivate the ascending flame of fire. Naturally, this frost flame technique used the essence of a cultivator to cultivate it, and it was related to the cultivator's physique. Different cultivators of the 5 elements would cultivate different frost flame technique. But what cultivated frost flame technique was the fire seed of frost flame technique. That is, the fire seed that Luan Qing divided from her frost flame technique. Xiao Hua comprehended for a long time, his brows tightly knitted. He opened his mouth, and a bit of frost flame technique flew out of his body, lightly floating in front of him. This frost flame technique admittedly has all 5 elements, but clearly, the speed at which it swallows would attribute spiritual energy is much faster than other spiritual energy. This Luan Qing should have a wood attribute physique. This young master's physique is hidden fire. Using this fire seed to cultivate it is a lot worse. Moreover, this young master used Luan Qing's fire seed to cultivate it. This frost flame technique can be considered as the reproduction of Luan Qing's frost flame technique. In essence, it carries the mark of the Luan family. If this frost flame technique is purely used to refine magic tools, it can be used to attack, but it has a huge drawback. If someone else obtains the Luan family's fire seed that is several generations older than Luan Qing, this young master's frost flame technique will be innately shorter than that person. This young master will be inviting trouble to himself. It's really inappropriate, really inappropriate. Xiaohua hesitated again, because his previous idea was only to use this frost flame technique to refine tools. But after seeing the fire art and Luan Qing's obscure introduction, he knew that refining tools was only the use of the frost flame technique after its decline. He already had other ideas in his heart, and didn't want to simply use this inferior fire seed to cultivate the frost flame technique. Moreover, listening to Luan Qing's tone, although this frost flame technique is a heavenly fire seed, its power will decrease with each generation. He didn't know how many generations this frost flame technique has been passed down. Even if it was successfully cultivated, he feared that it would have long lost the reputation of being a heavenly fire seed. It also couldn't be used to refine strange materials like the Great Wisdom Sword, so why would he go through the trouble of cultivating it? Damn it, after thinking about it, this young master seems to have suffered a loss. Xiaohua bitterly smiled and put away the jade slip and fire seed. He thought to himself, unless I find a pure frost flame technique, the Samadhi True Fire's fire art and mother-child spirit fruit can be considered to have benefited Luan Qing for nothing. However, where could he get the pure Ling Yuzhu fire seed? Even the Luan family didn't have it, so where could he find it in this vast Xiaoyu continent? I'd better obediently stick to my old profession first. Xiaohua patted his head, and his mind entered the space. As he urged the puppet to open up a new medicinal field, preparing to plant the more than 400 bell spirit herbs he had just won from the auction, he looked at Little Yellow and Little Silver. These two little things were sleeping soundly, especially Little Silver, who was no longer as quick-witted as before. He was lying in a pile of spirit herbs, and there seemed to be a half-eaten spirit fruit in his little mouth. His little tail swayed slightly in the spirit herbs from time to time, and his little eyes were closed very tightly. His little eyelids were still twitching slightly from time to time, as if he had sensed Xiaohua's state of mind. He opened his eyes a little bit to sweep them over, and then closed them tightly again. The golden lines on Little Silver's nose seemed to have deepened a lot, and they're actually a little curved, as if they're going to become runes. Xiaohua was a little surprised. Also, Little Silver's body is even more pure white, and there are clearly some golden threads on his body. Shortly after, Xiaohua looked at Little Yellow. There wasn't any special change in Little Yellow, but it felt like it was growing again. These two little things can grow even when they're sleeping. I'm really envious. Xiaohua sighed with emotion as he looked at the divine power centipede not far away from Little Silver. After several years of recuperation, this thing had already recovered from its injuries. It was just that, this thing was also sleeping soundly and quietly. Furthermore, it seemed to be extremely afraid of Little Silver, and kept quite a distance from him. Looking at the black brilliance on the divine power centipede's back, which also had a faint golden light, Xiaohua understood. Could it be that this young master's space, can all demon beasts evolve? But time clearly passes slower in this space than outside. Look at the water pattern butterfly egg, it's been so many years, but it still hasn't hatched. And there's also the ice worm king egg, the damaged part hasn't been repaired yet. Xiaohua changed his mind and thought, forget about these things that haven't hatched yet. However, this godly power centipede will most likely be of great use in the future. This young master still needs to find a spirit storage pouch and place this thing inside to raise properly. Chapter 1708. Xiaohua's mind came out of the space, and his eyes were filled with anticipation. When he thought about how Fan Tong had controlled the mighty power centipede to attack him, his heart burned with passion. This is a spirit beast. If I can control it freely, it'll be like having an extra helper. However, this mighty power centipede is different from Little Yellow and Little Silver. I can't control it myself, but if I rely on Little Silver to control it, there'll be another obstacle. It seems that I have to find a way to control it. While he was thinking, Xiaohua took out the book from the spirit husbandry sect. In the past, his cultivation was weak and he only wanted to find cultivation methods and pills that could increase his cultivation. He didn't care about the insect scripture or the spirit beasts. Later on, he focused on cultivation and put his energy on Dharma treasures, so he didn't think about these things. Only now did he remember the insect scripture that he had long forgotten. And as expected, the spirit husbandry sect's jade slip doesn't have any cultivation methods, but there are methods to raise and control spirit beasts. The insect scripture naturally talked about spirit insects and how to raise them. There was a general introduction to all kinds of spirit insects. Unfortunately, Xiaohua wasn't interested in this and only looked at it briefly before flipping to the back. "Oh, it's here." When he flipped to the end of the insect scripture, Xiaohua saw a few pages of methods to control spirit insects. Then, Xiaohua didn't hesitate and carefully comprehended it word by word. After an unknown amount of time, Xiaohua put away the insect scripture and closed his eyes. Then, as if he thought of something, he waved his hand and another small book came out of the space. It was the one Ling Jingyi gave to Xiaohua, along with the magic treasure that could subdue the fire ape. Xiaohua didn't dare to take it out casually before, for fear that Ling Jingyi had done something to it. Now that he thought about controlling spirit insects, he naturally thought of this book. Unfortunately, this book only recorded the method to refine the magic treasure Shadow Moon. It didn't say anything about how to control spirit beasts. Shadow Moon is so important to Flying Phoenix Ridge, and it's passed down from their ancestors. After refining it, I should be able to obtain the method to subdue the fire ape. Xiaohua kept the booklet and thought to himself, now, this young master's cultivation should be comparable to Ling Jingyi and Pu Jianyuan. However, since the two of them are unable to subdue the fire ape, this young master should not be anxious. Then, Xiaohua closed his eyes and pondered hard. His hands would form some mysterious seals from time to time, stirring the world spirit energy in the room. After a long time, Xiaohua opened his eyes and waved his hand, taking the godly power centipede out of the space. The godly power centipede suddenly appeared in the middle of the room. It was very surprised and looked a bit impatient. It twisted its body a few times and flew in a certain direction. Xiaohua seemed to have a card up his sleeve. He opened his left hand slightly and grabbed at the air. The divine power centipede immediately stopped in midair. As if it had sensed danger, the Herculean centipede struggled with all its might. Its pitch-black body glowed with a faint golden color. This Herculean centipede is indeed powerful. Seeing that the Herculean centipede was still able to move under his magic power, Xiaohua couldn't help but be astonished. Then, his face revealed a happy expression. The seals in his right hand were quickly formed. Jiji. Different seals struck the Herculean centipede's body. The Herculean centipede struggled even more fiercely. The more it struggled, the more magic power surged out from Xiaohua's left hand. After the time it took to eat a meal, the Herculean centipede stopped struggling. It had a dejected look as it floated in midair. Damn it, subduing a spiritual insect is actually so difficult? Xiaohua sighed. If this young master didn't have so much magic power, this little thing would have really flown away. Then he withdrew his left hand. Both his hands formed seals and attacked the Herculean centipede. After several seals, an illusory image emerged from the Herculean centipede's body. Xiaohua knew that this was the Herculean centipede's soul essence. When the soul essence left the body, Xiaohua was very cautious as he formed the last seal. He pressed his thumb between his eyebrows. Then he shouted, "Quick!" He pressed his hand down. That thumb was pressing on the Herculean centipede's soul essence. The Herculean centipede seemed to be burned by fire. It struggled painfully and rolled back and forth in midair. However, the strange thing was that the Herculean centipede's soul essence didn't move at all under Xiaohua's thumb. "Withdraw!" Xiaohua chanted again. The trace of the primordial spirit in his hand was smeared on the Herculean centipede's soul essence. In an instant, Xiaohua felt as if he was the Herculean centipede and the Herculean centipede was him. A burning sensation came from the depths of his soul. Hiss! Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air and hurriedly withdrew his hand. The Herculean centipede immediately stopped rolling. The soul essence was immediately absorbed into the Herculean centipede's body. At the same time, the pain Xiao Hua felt immediately disappeared. Damn it, no wonder I can't take in too many spiritual insects. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly and absorbed the exhausted Herculean centipede into his space. The last bit of pain is indeed short, but it's enough to cause damage to a cultivator's primordial spirit. Subduing such a small Herculean centipede took so much effort. What about subduing a fire ape? It'll be even more difficult. Oh, right, I wonder if there's any record of the Herculean centipede in the insect scripture? Xiao Hua thought of the insect scripture. Spirit husbandry sex insect scripture mostly recorded spiritual insects. After flipping through it, there was indeed a record of the Herculean centipede. However, there weren't many records. Herculean centipede, strong, feeds on spiritual stones, earth spiritual stones are the best. Ranked 87th. After that, there was nothing else. Ranked 87th? Xiao Hua was slightly stunned and thought to himself, such a powerful Herculean centipede is only ranked 87th? Then, which spiritual insect is ranked first? Xiao Hua hurriedly flipped to the front. Dream mirage butterfly, born to create illusions, feeds on all kinds of mirage spirits. Ranked first. Spirit devouring insect, swallows all kinds of spiritual insects, eats everything. Ranked second. Water pattern butterfly, controls water-type spiritual energy, lives together with rainbow epiphyllum, ranked 42nd. Feiqing, controls earth-type spiritual energy, is fast, counters ice worm, ranked 50th. Ice worm, controls water-type spiritual energy, lives in groups, ranked 56th. Damn it, I thought ice worm and water pattern butterfly were some amazing spiritual insects, but their rankings are actually so low? Herculean centipede is also ranked 87th. Damn it, I wonder how powerful the dream mirage butterfly and spirit devouring insect that are ranked second are. After Xiao Hua saw it, he couldn't help but be shocked. However, why aren't there any fire apes and spirit seeking mice? And even sky shaking beast isn't there. Chapter 1709. The spirit seeking mouse and heaven shaking mouse are not in this insect scripture. Furthermore, the god power centipede is so powerful, but it is only ranked 87th. That Fei Qing who is ranked 50th, wasn't it easy for me to kill him that day? I can't see how powerful it is. This insect scripture? I'm afraid it can't be real. Xiao Hua thought and put the insect scripture into his space. Actually, it wasn't Xiao Hua's idea. Since the spirit husbandry sect could record the insect scripture, there must be a basis for it. Although the god power centipede was strong, in a fight between cultivators, magic power was the most important. If the god power centipede didn't have great strength, it would be useless to use force to break through spells. Fei Qing's speed was extremely fast, and it was much more useful than the god power centipede in a fight between cultivators. At this moment, the restriction in Xiao Hua's house shook. Hee, I think senior brother Qian is looking for me. Xiao Hua jumped down from the cloud bed. Seeing that there were no loopholes in the house, he took out a magic tablet and removed the restriction. As expected, it was Qian Diheng outside the house. Seeing Xiao Hua open the door, he smiled. Junior brother Xiao, I have completed my task. As he spoke, he entered the house and scanned with his spiritual sense. With a slap of his hand, he took out a three-pronged fork that was 1 foot long from his storage bag. At the tip of the three-pronged fork, there were 3 sharp points that faintly flashed with different lights. Within the lights, there were thin runes flowing. What do you think of my halberd? Qian Diheng waved it flauntingly. As he slightly channeled his magic power, the 3 points of the fork gradually flashed with light. As the runes flowed, they absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the house. Gradually, 3 balls of light of different colors flashed at the 3 points of the fork. Senior brother Qian's magic weapon is a little strange. Xiao Hua scanned with his spiritual sense and said in shock, other people's magic weapons have only 1 element, but yours actually has 3 different elements. metal, wood, and water. Of course, the way of attack is different, but the power seems to be much weaker, right? Hee, junior brother Xiao, you don't have to worry about this. Qian Diheng waved his hand and put away the magic tool. He stroked it with his hand as if it was a treasure and said, "The power of this magic tool will absolutely not decrease because of the attacks of 3 attributes. I won't tell you the details. You only need to know that I spent a large amount of spirit stones to refine 3 different types of magic tools into an even more powerful magic tool." 3 different magic tools? Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. Hee, don't worry, junior brother Xiao. How can the place I recommend be wrong? Qian Diheng said complacently, this workshop is the most mysterious place in the Weeping Moon City. Think about it, to be able to forge 3 kinds of magic tools together without weakening their offensive power, what kind of cultivation base does that artificer have? TSK, even if he's not in the late stage of foundation establishment, he's at least in the gold core stage. Don't worry and go. Xiao Hua rubbed his nose with his hand and said with a wry smile, but I'm afraid there's also a lot of spirit stones, right? Of course, asking a gold core stage tool refiner to help, the price is naturally high. Qian Diheng smiles and whispers a number to Xiao Hua. When Xiao Hua heard this, his face immediately turned green. So it's almost the same as bidding for 1 or 2 magic tools. How can it be the same? Qian Diheng obviously didn't care about the number of spirit stones. He waved his hand and said, this was modified by a tool refiner according to my request and also refined according to my cultivation base. It can't be compared with ordinary magic tools that can be bought through bidding. Moreover, junior brother Xiao also knows that I only have 1 defensive magic tool. Although I'm not afraid of life-threatening situations in many cases, it can't be used to always be attacked by others. I can't get the same cloud suppressing seal as you, but getting a powerful magic tool is still possible. Xiao Hua nodded. Senior brother Qian, you sent those 3 magic tools over. Did you only get them today? Exactly 10 days. Qian Diheng patted Xiao Hua's shoulder and said, junior brother Xiao, don't blame me for wasting time. You also know the reason. When I get this halberd, I'll be relieved. No matter. I know. Xiao Hua's magic tools were of unknown origin, so he naturally understood Qian Diheng. How about this? I still have some spirit stones left. If junior brother Xiao doesn't have enough spirit stones, I'll lend them to you first. Qian Diheng rolled his eyes and said with a smile, forget it. Xiao Hua knew that he lacked a lot of spirit stones. Qian Diheng's spirit stones were just a drop in the bucket. Senior brother Qian, just tell me the location. Okay. Qian Diheng smiled and whispered, telling him the location of the workshop. Then, he patted and handed a triangular magic tablet to Xiao Hua. This magic tablet is the certificate to enter the workshop. Without it, the workshop won't accept you. Xiao Hua scanned the magic tablet with his divine sense. There was a strange fluctuation of spiritual power on it. Obviously, it was a special magic tablet. He reached out and took it. It was cold to the touch, and he didn't know what material it was made of. Go quickly, junior brother Xiao. If you want to refine your cloud-suppressing seal, I'm afraid it will take a long time. You should calculate our schedule. Qian Diheng said meaningfully. Okay, junior brother understands. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and sent Qian Diheng out. He followed him out and saw that Qian Diheng entered the house and activated the restriction. Then he saw that Sun Shu and Kun Fian's houses were also protected by restriction. He knew that the 2 were also working hard in their houses. Xiao Hua sat in the spirit camel carriage and arrived at the place Qian Diheng mentioned. He paid the spirit stones and looked around. This place was actually very lively. It was different from what he imagined. Hidden in the city. That's right. Xiao Hua squinted his eyes and glanced at the lively workshop 3 zhang away. Then he looked at a tea house on his left. Then, Xiao Hua walked to a secluded place and changed his appearance and height. Then he put on camouflage clothes and walked slowly to the tea house. There were many cultivators in the tea house. There were all kinds of cultivators, but different cultivators gathered in different circles. Those with low cultivations were far from those with high cultivations. Senior, what kind of spirit tea do you want to drink? A boy around the second layer of qi, refining hurriedly greeted him with a smile. Anything. Xiaohua looked at the stairs not far away and said with a smile, Can I go upstairs? Upstairs is the place where foundation establishment seniors drink tea. If senior is a foundation establishment cultivator, you can naturally go up. The boy said with a smile. Foundation establishment? When Xiaohua heard this, he didn't say anything and walked up the stairs. He was wearing camouflage clothes now. Who could see his cultivation? Naturally, he wasn't afraid. Sure enough, when he went up the stairs, other than foundation establishment cultivators, there were also a few cultivators wearing camouflage clothes like him. However, these cultivators were all alone. There were some spirit fruits and spirit tea in front of them, and they were enjoying it alone. Xiaohua found a place near the street and waited for the boy to bring him some spirit tea and a plate of spirit fruits. Xiaohua slowly tasted them. His gaze wandered around the street. There were many cultivators going in and out of the workshop. Most of them were qi refining cultivators. Occasionally, there were also foundation establishment cultivators. Of course, there were also some cultivators wearing camouflage clothes. Their cultivation couldn't be seen. There shouldn't be anything unusual. Xiaohua slowly finished drinking a pot of spirit tea and stood up to leave. At this time, a voice transmitted to him. Fellow Taoist, are you here to participate in the secret auction? Secret auction? Xiaohua was slightly stunned. He turned around and saw a cultivator wearing camouflage clothes facing him. Fellow Taoist, don't panic. I heard that there's a secret auction here. I want to exchange something inside, but I don't have a command talisman. Therefore, I can only wait here. To tell you the truth, I just asked all the foundation establishment fellow Taoists in this tea house. None of them are here to participate. Xiaohua stopped and said promptly, If fellow Taoist has a command talisman, I am willing to pay a high price for it. I'm sorry, fellow Taoist. I just came here to drink tea and buy some magic tools in the workshop below. I've never heard of any secret auction. If fellow Taoist wants something good, can't the auction in Weeping Moon City work? Xiaohua naturally refused. Oh, I'm sorry to disturb fellow Taoist. That cultivator's tone was filled with indescribable disappointment. However, when he saw Xiaohua's figure disappear inside the workshop, he looked at the other foundation establishment cultivators. Senior, do you want to buy magic tools or materials for refining? As soon as Xiaohua entered the workshop, a fifth-layer tool refining cultivator came to greet him. He directly ignored Xiaohua's camouflage clothes and said very respectfully. Xiaohua raised his eyes and looked inside. This crafty workshop was extremely large, and there were also a lot of people inside. All kinds of refining materials were placed in different places. Just like the cultivator in front of him who was welcoming guests, there were at least 10 of them. Yes, they're both refining shops in Weeping Moon City. This workshop is 100 times better than Luanji's shop. Xiaohua muttered to himself. However, when he casually asked about the price of a commonly used refining material, he curled his lips. Although the materials of this workshop were good, the price was more than 30% higher than Luanji's shop. Forget it. Xiaohua lost interest in continuing his act. He clapped his hands and took out the triangular magic tablet. He said in a low voice, I have something to trouble Qiao workshop with. That cultivator's gaze fell on the magic tablet and he was slightly startled. Then he immediately said respectfully, Senior, please put away the magic tablet. Junior will ask the assistant shopkeeper to come over. After saying that cultivator quickly left. Not long after, a thin early-stage foundation establishment cultivator with a black mole on the left side of his face walked over. He cupped his hands and said, I, Xia Ming, greet fellow Taoist. Fellow Taoist Xia. Xiaohua saw that Xia Ming didn't ask for his name and didn't answer. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist, this way please. Xia Ming raised his hand and led Xiaohua to a corner of the entrance hall. They followed a staircase to the second floor. There were clearly few people on the second floor. There were only a dozen or so foundation establishment cultivators accompanied by female cultivators who were welcoming guests. They lowered their heads and looked at the many magic tools on the table. Chapter 1710. Hearing that someone was going upstairs, the foundation building cultivators only slightly raised their heads and glanced around. When they saw that it was Xiao Hua in a camouflage robe, they frowned and looked down again. "Fellow Taoist, please come this way." Xia Ming led Xiao Hua to the end of the second floor. He formed hand seals and a small door as tall as a person appeared on the wall. Then he went in first. Xiao Hua's figure paused for a moment, then he also went in. Behind the small door was an empty hut with no decorations. "Fellow Taoist, please take out your magic card for inspection." Xia Ming slapped his hand and took out a small box from his storage bag. It was emitting a milky white light. Xiao Hua handed over the triangular magic card. Xia Ming also looked at it carefully and threw it into the box. As the magic card was thrown in, the color of the box gradually changed. Soon, it turned into an orange-red color. "Quick!" Xia Ming's left hand formed hand seals again and hit the box. With a ting sound, an orange-red beam of light shot out from the box and hit the roof above Xia Ming's head. With a whoosh sound as Xiao Hua's gaze moved up, there was a ripple of light above his head and a small triangular door appeared. Xia Ming nodded and didn't return the magic card to Xiao Hua. He pointed with his hand and said with a smile, "Yes, fellow Taoist, your magic card is correct. Please go in." "Thank you, fellow Taoist." Seeing this, Xiao Hua flew into the triangular door above his head. When Xiao Hua landed in the pavilion on the third floor, he looked around. This was a slightly dark triangular space. There were no decorations inside this space, just like the small room from before. On the four walls of this space, there were only a few bright flower stones. "Fellow Taoist, please." While Xiao Hua was still sizing it up, there was a slight distortion in the air in front of him. A flat human figure seemed to be squeezed out from a crack, gradually revealing itself. When the entire figure went from flat to full, it was actually a cultivator wearing a camouflage robe. He couldn't see his specific cultivation. Xiao Hua didn't dare to neglect and quickly saluted, "Greetings, fellow Taoist." "Yes, my surname is Bai. How should I address you, fellow Taoist?" The cultivator's tone was very indifferent. "My surname is Huang." Xiao Hua said with a smile. "All right, fellow Taoist Huang." The cultivator calmly said as if it was a routine matter, "Since fellow Taoist has a spell card from my workshop, then you must have been introduced by a fellow Taoist from my workshop. Of course, my workshop won't trace your origin. May I ask if fellow Taoist Huang needs any help from my workshop?" Xiao Hua was still preparing his words, but when he saw the cultivator being so straightforward, he was unexpectedly stunned. Then he suddenly understood. That's right. If the craftsman were so wishy-washy, who would dare to refine a magic tool of unknown origin? After pondering for a moment, Xiao Hua took out the four-phase wheel and the spear-shaped magic tool from the space and handed them over. He said with a smile, "I have two magic tools. I need Xiao Workshop to change their appearance." The cultivator took the Dharma artifacts and looked at them. Then he scanned them with his strong divine will and carefully observed the two Dharma artifacts. This divine sense. I'm afraid if it's not at the early stage of the Golden Core realm, it's at least at the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. Xiao Hua also tried. The strand of divine will he left on the Dharma artifacts was immediately expelled. This caused Xiao Hua to be scared witless and didn't dare to do anything else. The cultivator didn't pay attention to Xiao Hua. After a while, he whispered, "Fellow Taoist Huang, these two magic tools, to be honest, the refinement is really not good. Especially this spear-shaped magic tool. Aside from its special material, the formation inside is really clumsy." Wait a moment. Speaking up to here, the cultivator's tone was a bit strange. After carefully observing for a moment, he nodded and said, "I made a mistake just now. The material of this magic tool is not only special but also rare. It is a bit similar to the corpse of a demonic beast that I just killed. Unfortunately, it is still a bit lacking. When Xiaohua heard the cultivator's unclear words, he was also at a loss. However, he didn't dare to blindly ask and only listened quietly. Then, the cultivator took out the 4 symbols wheel and said, "This magic tool. Although it can mobilize the 4 kinds of spiritual qi of heaven and earth, it is a pity that the formation is crude and the magic power it can use is too little. If you want to change it, it would be better to directly refine it." Xiaohua's heart was moved and he whispered, "Senior, how many spirit stones do you need to refine these 2 magic tools again?" "Not much." The cultivator didn't even think and reported a number. "Still not much." Xiaohua was secretly shocked. Soon after, he smiled apologetically and said, "Junior doesn't have enough spirit stones." "Oh no. Is it possible to use spirit grass and other things?" "Yes, of course." The cultivator casually said, "Aside from spirit stones, magic tools and magic treasures can all be used as spirit stones." Xiao paused for a moment, then raised the spear-shaped magic tool and said, "If fellow Taoist Huang is embarrassed, I can modify this magic tool of yours into a consumable magic tool." Consumable magic tool? Xiaohua was slightly dazed. He had never heard of this kind of magic tool. Hee. The cultivator laughed and placed the 2 magic tools on the ground. He said, "This is what my crafty workshop calls it. I hope Senior can dispel my confusion. Fellow Taoist must know that magic tools can be detonated." The cultivator glanced at Xiaohua, seeming to already know Xiaohua's cultivation. He said, "Since magic tools can be detonated, why can't you refine some magic tools that only use detonation?" Of course." Xiaohua suddenly understood and laughed. "Presumably, refining this consumable magic tool doesn't require too many materials and profound formations, right?" "Precisely so." The cultivator nodded and said, "But these materials are rather special. Moreover, they have a strong point." Xiaohua asked curiously, "What strong point?" "Enormous power." The cultivator said somewhat complacently, "If there are materials with fellow Taoist cultivation, if you succeed, you can kill an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator." Hiss, Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. He didn't know if he was surprised by the magic tool's power or the cultivator before him's cultivation. From what Senior said, if Junior's magic tool is made into a consumable magic tool, Senior already has some demonic beast materials? Xiaohua probed, "What other materials are needed? How many spirit stones will it cost?" "We also need the lizard's glue bone." The cultivator said, "With this lizard's glue bone, the magic tool made from it has a 70% chance of killing an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Otherwise, it can only have a 30% chance." "So that's how it is." Xiaohua suddenly understood. Presumably, he wanted to use the lizard's concealment divine ability. Waiting for the cultivator to state the number of spirit stones, Xiaohua inwardly muttered to himself, "What does fellow Taoist Huang plan to do?" The cultivator saw that a long time had passed and asked somewhat unhappily, "Hee, the crafty workshop really lives up to its reputation." Xiaohua laughed and waved his hand. The 2 magic tools were brushed to the side, and he took out the 100-layer cloud seal and MO cloud armor. The cultivator saw the 2 magic tools and was also stunned. Chapter 17:11. "Senior, please don't blame me." Xiaohua handed over the 2 magic treasures and smiled apologetically. "This is Junior's first time coming to the craftsman's workshop, so I couldn't help but have some probing in my heart. Please forgive me." The cultivator stared at Xiaohua for a long time and smiled. "I didn't expect fellow Taoist Huang to be so secretive. An aura refining cultivator actually has 2 magic treasures?" Heh. Xiaohua smiled. "I won't hide it from Senior. The first 2 magic treasures are Junior's. These 2 magic treasures?" Heh. Fellow Taoist Huang doesn't need to say too much. This old man was just casually asking. The cultivator waved his hand and carefully examined the 100-layer cloud seal and MO cloud armor. After a long time, the cultivator asked, "How do you want to deal with these 2 magic treasures? Do you want to reforge them? Or do you want to change their appearance?" "Senior, what do you mean?" Xiaohua didn't have any thoughts in his heart and asked sincerely. Junior is just following orders. The specifics will depend on Senior. Then this old man won't be polite. The cultivator turned the two magic treasures over and over again and said, defensive magic treasures have always been rare. The reason is that defensive formations are rarely seen. At the same time, it's difficult to refine them into magic treasures. Although fellow Taoists' two magic treasures are somewhat damaged, the defensive formations at the core are intact. It won't be easy to refine them again, but changing their appearance is possible. However, this old man thinks that it would be better to combine these two magic treasures into one and refine them into a defensive robe. Great. Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. He clapped his hands and said, my humble sect? That's the order. Yes, but although the price of refining two magic treasures together is lower than refining two magic treasures separately, the amount of spirit stones required is also not small. I wonder if fellow Taoist is prepared? The cultivator indifferently asked. I won't hide it from Senior. I'm afraid the spirit stones in Junior's storage pouch aren't enough. Xiao Hua smiled apologetically. Junior does have some old spirit herbs? Oh? Fellow Taoist also wants to trade spirit herbs and magic treasures? The cultivator was a bit surprised. Yeah. What's wrong? Xiao Hua was slightly surprised. The cultivator shook his head and said, it's nothing. My workshop has always been accepting spirit stones and magic tools. But recently, some cultivators with powerful backgrounds had spirit stones, but they were all trading with spiritual herbs, magic tools, and even magic treasures. That's why I am a little puzzled. Others don't know, Junior just doesn't have enough spirit stones. Xiao Hua laughed. It is indeed a little strange. The cultivator also smiled and said, I only hope that this old man's worries are groundless. All right. Fellow Taoist can't be thinking of using these two magic tools to exchange for the spirit stones, right? That's right. Is that possible? Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. Of course it's possible, but it's still not enough. You'll need spirit stones or spirit grass. The cultivator once again stated the amount of spirit stones he needed. Motherfucker, that's a lot. Xiao Hua calculated the number of spirit stones he had and said with a smile, this 4-phase can be used as spirit stones. Junior still wants to ask Senior to change this magic tool into a consumable magic tool. Saying that, Xiao Hua took out the lizard's bone and handed it to the cultivator. Of course it's possible. The cultivator carefully looked at it and said, this old man will add some materials myself, it's not troublesome. These are the remaining spirit stones and a few stalks of spirit grass. Xiao Hua was happy in his heart and took out some spirit stones and 5 stalks of spirit grass that were around 5,000 years old. Fellow Taoist doesn't need to be so anxious. The cultivator waved his hand and said, this 4-phase can be left behind. The other things can be handed over to the workshop the next time fellow Taoist comes to pick them up. I wonder when Junior will come next time? Xiao Hua waved his sleeve and put away the spirit stones and spirit grass. This consumable magic tool is easy, you can come and pick it up after 20 days. As for these 2 magic tools, I'm afraid I won't be able to do it alone. I'll need other people to do it and it'll take a year. A year? Xiao Hua was stunned. This long? Fellow Taoist Huang doesn't refine magic tools, so you don't know the difficulty of refining magic tools? The cultivator said with a smile, this is a magic tool. If I can refine it in a day, would it still be a magic tool? Junior's words have caused Senior to laugh. Xiao Hua quickly cupped his hands and said, this is your magic tablet next time. The cultivator waved his hand and another triangular magic tablet flew in front of Xiao Hua. Next time, you can use this magic tablet to come to my workshop to pick up a refined magic tool. In the future, you can also use it to ask us to help you refine magic tools. Of course, you can also give this magic tablet to a cultivator you think is reliable. Junior understands. Xiao Hua took the magic tablet and said with a smile, Junior will come and pick up the magic tool in 20 days. Good. Fellow Taoist, please. The cultivator raised his hand and cast an incantation seal onto a nearby wall. A small door suddenly appeared and his body began to distort as he gradually disappeared from the spot. "Thank you, Senior." Xiaohua very respectfully stood up and bowed. Outside the small door was the corridor of the third floor. Xiaohua walked on the corridor and the small door behind him gradually disappeared. There were no more rooms on the third floor. Alas, this illusion is still not good. If I meet a golden core cultivator, I will be seen through. Fortunately, I can change my appearance, otherwise I really can't hide my whereabouts. Xiaohua's eyes turned and came down from the third floor. The cultivator called Xia Ming was waiting at the corner of the second floor. When he saw Xiaohua come down, he cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for coming to my workshop, fellow Taoist. 20 days later, fellow Taoist can come and find me with the magic tablet. Senior White has already said that the rest of the spirit stones can wait for fellow Taoist to come 1 year later. It won't be too late to pay then." "Very good." Xiaohua smiled and left the workshop under Xia Ming's guidance. 2 of the foundation establishment cultivators on the second floor didn't leave. When they saw Xiaohua suddenly come down from the third floor, they were even more surprised and couldn't help but take a few more glances. Knowing that these cultivators didn't understand the secret of the workshop, Xiaohua sighed. "It's really good to have a sect. If I was a loose cultivator, I'm afraid that even if I cracked my head, I still wouldn't know that this workshop can also do the shady business of repairing magic treasures." When he left the workshop, the sky was already dark. Xiaohua identified the direction and was about to leave, but his gaze fell on a small building several tens of feet away. This building was simply piled up with huge stones, but its simplicity didn't appear simple. It even had a hint of great craftsmanship. Xiaohua knew that this was the location of the secret auction in Weeping Moon City. Moreover, this time, it was almost time. Thinking of the anxious expression of the foundation establishment cultivator in the tea house just now, Xiaohua couldn't help but think, others want to go but can't go. Don't tell me this young master will waste this opportunity? However, this young master's cultivation level is already there. It's not very appropriate to be seen through with a glance, right? Hee, if you can see through me, then so be it. It's not my true appearance anyway. Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "Moreover, the pill formula for the clear flower pill still hasn't been found. Even if I return to the Imperial Thunder sect after traveling, I can only obtain a limited number of clear flower pills. The sect can't give the pill formula to me. Forget it, I'll go and try my luck. Maybe I can exchange it for the pill formula." After finishing his calculations, Xiaohua walked towards the building. Perhaps it was still early, but when Xiaohua arrived in front of the building, no other cultivators came with him. After looking around, Xiaohua quickly walked in. The interior of the building was very ordinary, just like an ordinary inn. A few children of the 4th or 5th layer of the aura refining realm were standing inside. When they saw Xiaohua enter, one of them very respectfully welcomed him. He bowed and saluted. "Senior, are you here for a meal or to stay?" "This old man came to see if there are any demonic beast cores here." Xiaohua hesitated for a moment, but still said the words in the command talisman. Sure enough, when the disciple heard this, he didn't find it strange. Instead, he smiled and said, "Senior, please follow me." Soon after, the disciple took the lead and led Xiaohua to a small house. The disciple pushed the door open and retreated to the side. "Senior, please." Xiaohua nodded and entered the small house. The disciple carefully closed the door and slowly walked away. Hearing the disciple's footsteps, Xiaohua looked around and released his divine sense. This small house was different from the small house in the craftsman's workshop. The 4 walls were made of rough boulders. However, there was obviously an extremely powerful restriction on the boulders. Xiaohua's divine sense had just touched it when it was bounced back. "Wait here." Xiaohua looked inside the small house. It was empty without any furnishings. The 4 walls were also blank. He couldn't help but be stunned. This disciple didn't say anything? But on second thought, those who could come to this secret auction were all Foundation Establishment and Golden Core seniors. It wasn't their first or second time, so there was naturally no need to remind them. There's still a bit of time. We'll talk about it when the time comes. Xiao Hua sat cross-legged and closed his eyes to rest. Sure enough, after the time it took for an incense stick to burn, a light sound came from the stone wall behind Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua swept with his divine sense and saw a stone pop out from the wall behind him. When Xiao Hua got up to take a look, he saw that the stone was caved in. The caved-in was exactly the same shape as the command talisman. Xiao Hua understood. He patted his hand, took out the command talisman, and placed it in the caved-in area of the stone. It fit perfectly, without the slightest difference. With a one sound, the stone disappeared along with the command talisman. At this time, the four walls of the small house where Xiao Hua was in suddenly rotated. The restrictions on the four walls were completely activated, and a powerful threat was born from the four walls. Attack formation. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept and his face immediately changed. The power of this activation formation was very strong. It was definitely not something that Xiao Hua could deal with his current cultivation. Damn it! Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. He immediately took out the cloud-suppressing seal to protect his body. The four walls rotated even faster. It didn't slow down in the slightest because Xiao Hua took out his magic treasure. Seeing the stone wall disappear, the ground under his feet also gradually disappeared. Xiao Hua felt as if he was standing in the void. Just as Xiao Hua was panicking at the place where the stone disappeared, a gorgeous three-colored brilliance appeared. Then, a rainbow bridge quickly stretched out, extending to Xiao Hua's feet. Chapter 1712. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He stepped on the rainbow bridge, and a tricolored light barrier appeared on top of the rainbow bridge, protecting Xiao Hua. At the same time, the rainbow bridge brought Xiao Hua back. When the rainbow bridge had shrunk by half, from the four walls of the small house, as well as the arrays above and below, endless flames appeared, engulfing the entire small house. Only the light barrier Xiao Hua was in didn't have the slightest trace of flames. Oh my god! This is too powerful, right? Xiao Hua admittedly knew the fire escape technique, but within the flames of this array, which was used to deal with Foundation establishment and even Gold Core Realm cultivators, he would probably not even have a corpse left. When Xiao Hua's figure disappeared into the flaming stone wall, the entire small house was completely engulfed in flames. Xiao Hua's eyes first darkened, then brightened. He was once again in a space with a radius of 1 zhang. In the center of this space was a jade table, and on top of it was a black robe. Do I need to change my clothes? Xiao Hua scanned it with his divine sense. His divine sense actually couldn't penetrate the robe, and he immediately understood what Chang Fian said. Ah, good, so that's how it is? Xiao Hua laughed loudly, and used his hand to pick up the robe. It was a strange Taoist robe. When Xiao Hua put on the Taoist robe, his entire body was concealed within the robe, and no one could see that Xiao Hua was wearing the camouflage robe. This robe is really strange. My divine sense can penetrate from the inside, but it can't penetrate from the outside. It can't penetrate at all. No wonder Senior Chang said it wouldn't be exposed. Just as Xiao Hua was thinking, a light came from a corner of the space. Xiao Hua quickly walked towards the corner of the space. Although the corner looked very close, Xiao Hua walked for the time it took to brew a cup of tea to reach it. In front of him was a small door. When Xiao Hua looked back, the entire small house seemed incomparably huge. This method, sigh, it's really a brilliant method. Xiao Hua sighed slightly, and plunged into the small door. When Xiao Hua came out of the small door, he saw a rather large hall in front of him. In the middle of the hall, there was a rather large round jade table. Next to the table, there were more than 10 jade chairs. At the head of the table, a cultivator wearing a black robe was already standing there. Following behind Xiao Hua were also a dozen cultivators dressed in black Taoist robes. However, they were all standing in different positions within the hall. As for their cultivation, Xiao Hua was unable to see through them. Xiao Hua slightly sized up the entire hall. The other cultivators didn't stop and directly walked towards the jade chairs closest to them. Seeing this, Xiao Hua did not dare to tarry and quickly left. Behind him, the small door gradually disappeared. When Xiao Hua walked to the front of the chair, The other people also arrived. However, everyone stood in front of the chair and didn't sit down. The cultivator at the head of the table glanced at the empty chairs and said in a strange voice, "Well, fellow Taoists, today's secret auction is about to start. I'm afraid there are some fellow Taoists who don't have time to come. Fellow Taoists, please take a seat." Seeing that the cultivator sat down, everyone also sat down. Only then did Xiao Hua slowly sit down. "Well, fellow Taoists, according to the convention of the secret auction, I will first take out 3 things. Fellow Taoists, you can start bidding. As for who will get the things in the end, it will be decided by I. After I, starting from I's left hand, fellow Taoists can take out 3 things to bid. Except for I who has the right to bid first, the other fellow Taoists who can bid for the things will also be decided by the owner of the things. Fellow Taoists, you don't have any objections, right? We don't." Seeing everyone speak in unison, Xiao Hua also hurriedly muttered, "Well, fellow Taoists are all frequent guests of the secret auction. I won't say much." That cultivator was very direct. He patted his hand, took out a jade box from his storage bag, and placed it on the table. "This is a 3,000-year-old profound Yin spirit grass. Fellow Taoists, please bid." "Ah? 3,000-year-old profound Yin spirit grass?" Xiao Hua was shocked. He knew that Xiansword sects Zhang Yutong and Zhang Yuha traveled thousands of miles to Meng country's Taiqing sect to look for profound Yin spirit grass. They even took out their magic treasures to prepare for the exchange. He didn't expect that the first thing to be bid in the secret auction of Weeping Moon City would be this profound Yin spirit grass. Moreover, it was a 3,000-year-old one. Damn, Senior Chang was right. This secret auction is really good stuff. Even if it's just to broaden my horizons, it's still good. Immediately, Xiao Hua understood that the pill formula of the clear flower pill that he was thinking of was probably not something that could be taken out in this secret auction. "I want to take a look at the color first," a cultivator not far from Xiao Hua said. His voice was also very strange. "Fellow Taoist, please." The cultivator at the head pointed his finger. The jade box slowly moved across the table and stopped in front of the other cultivator. That cultivator opened the jade box and looked at it. He smiled and said, "It really is a 3,000-year-old profound Yin spirit grass. Very good." Then he said a number of spirit stones. The number was really big. Xiao Hua's face was full of wry smile. He thought, it seems that this young master has to find a way to get some spirit stones. Without tens of thousands of spirit stones, there's no need to come to this kind of place. The 3,000-year-old profound Yin spirit grass attracted a lot of attention, and several cultivators continued to bid. When everyone stopped, the cultivator at the head of the table said, "Which fellow Taoist has other magic tools, magic treasures, or materials of similar value? You can show them to this poor Taoist now. If it's only spirit grass, then there's no need. And fellow Taoist, what do you think of this thing I have?" A cultivator took out a jade box and put it on the table. He pushed it in front of the cultivator at the head. The cultivator at the head opened it and looked. He then retreated and said, "Fellow Taoist, this thing is really good. However, I won't be bidding for it for the time being." That cultivator didn't answer. He put away the jade box and looked at it quietly. "Take a look at this thing I have." Another cultivator also took out a jade box, but it still didn't catch the cultivator's eye. Then a few more people also failed. In the end, the cultivator said, "If fellow Taoists have nothing else to bid, then this poor Taoist will give this to the fellow Taoist who just paid the spirit stone." After a moment of silence, a cultivator opposite Xiao Hua said hesitantly, "I do have something, but I'm afraid I'll make a fool of myself. No matter. Fellow Taoist, take it out and let me have a look." That cultivator also took out a jade bottle and put it on the table. Unexpectedly, that cultivator glanced at it and also hesitated for a moment. He said, "Fellow Taoist, this thing is barely suitable." As he said that, he waved his hand. The jade box containing the profound Yin spirit grass flew in front of that cultivator. "Good, thank you, fellow Taoist." That cultivator was obviously surprised. He waved his hand and put away the jade box. "So that's how it is." Xiao Hua understood. In this secret auction, as long as the owner of the item is interested in it, it doesn't matter how much others bids. Chapter 1713. That cultivator who acted as the steward was clearly very satisfied. Putting away the jade bottle, he took out another jade bottle and said, "This is I's second item, a nascent gestation pill. Who wants to see its quality?" A nascent gestation pill? Hearing this, Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. He knew that this nascent gestation pill was a medicinal pill used by core formation cultivators before they attacked nascent soul cultivation. Cultivators who took the nascent gestation pill could increase their chances of entering nascent soul by 30%. This kind of medicinal pill was even more precious than the nascent gestation pill used to attack nascent soul. Moreover, Xiao Hua also knew at this time that the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples were routinely provided with ordinary medicinal pills before they reached core formation late stage. As for the other special medicinal pills, such as the Elaine pill and clear flower pill used by Foundation establishment cultivators, as well as the soul concentrating pill, nascent gestation pill, and nascent gestation pill used by core formation cultivators, etc., all of these were obtained by relying on one's own luck. The nascent gestation pill appearing in this auction secret meeting was a medicinal pill that not even the cultivation sects could provide. How could he not be shocked? Unfortunately, looking at the other cultivators, each and every one of them was sitting steadily without any expression of shock at all. Damn, this young master has seen it. Xiao Hua inwardly curled his lips. This Dawn Rain Continent's cultivation world is really deep. This young master is just a frog sitting in a well and looking at the sky. All the cultivators seemed to be scheming, and no one rushed to bid first. The main hall was silent for no less than the time it took to brew a cup of tea before someone called out a number of spirit stones. Immediately after, among the 10+ cultivators, there were 5 cultivators who frequently increased the price. Xiao Hua's eyelids kept twitching as he watched from the side. Needless to say, these 5 cultivators were absolutely all core formation cultivators. Otherwise, they wouldn't covet the nascent gestation pill. Thinking about how there were so many core formation cultivators next to him, Xiao Hua somewhat couldn't sit still. This kind of pressure in the bottom of his heart was really great. He couldn't see through other people's cultivation, but that didn't mean that other people couldn't see through his cultivation. When the last cultivator called out the number, the entire main hall regained its tranquility. The cultivator at the head seat looked left and right, and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, the price of spirit stones is like this." Which fellow Taoist still has something of equivalent value? I have it here. The 2 cultivators who were bidding earlier clapped their hands at the same time and each took out a jade box. They presented it to the cultivator at the head of the table. The cultivator opened it separately, looked at it a few times, closed it again, and returned it to the 2. He said, "Fellow Taoists, your items are really good. Unfortunately, I can't use them." With that, he pointed at the jade bottle before him. The jade bottle flew toward the cultivator who had just bid. The cultivator clearly couldn't contain his excitement. He waved his hand and put the jade bottle into his bag of holding. Then the cultivator's movements became graceful. He took out a bag of holding and handed it over to the cultivator at the head of the table. He smiled and said, "Fellow cultivator, please take a look to see if the number of spirit stones matches." The cultivator at the head of the table opened the bag of holding and scanned it with his divine sense. He smiled and said, "The number of spirit stones is just right. Many thanks for fellow Taoist support." Then, the cultivator put away the bag of holding and took out another item. He threw it into the air. A jade-green brilliance rose into the air like the bright moon in the night sky. A burst of sound of waves hitting the shore rushed into Xiao Hua's mind. Xiao Hua felt a wave of dizziness and his vision went black. Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. He didn't care about being noticed and immediately used the exquisite leaf scripture. The Buddha Sarira in Xiao Hua's mind flashed a few times, and only then did the dizziness in Xiao Hua's mind was expelled. What kind of magic treasure is this? Xiao Hua's mind was still unsettled. He raised his eyes to look at the jade-green bead in the main hall and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This is a real magic treasure, right? It actually didn't need anyone to activate it. Just by its own power, it can pass through the maze. Also, this black Taoist robe is even more mysterious than the maze. Compared to it, this young master's cloud-suppressing seal really isn't worth mentioning. A glint of jealousy appeared in Xiaohua's eyes, and his determination to restore the cloud-suppressing seal became even more firm. The other cultivators were far from being affected by Xiaohua's shock. They all released their divine senses and firmly locked onto the bead. This is the magic treasure tied bead. As for its specific function, presumably I don't need to introduce it, right? Everyone is a big family. If I say too much, I'll just make a fool of myself. The cultivator in the seat of honor pointed with his finger, and the tied bead suddenly enlarged like a wheel. As it spun, a jade-green brilliance burst forth like a jade-green flame, circling around the entire main hall. The spiritual aura of the world inside the main hall was drawn by the bead, and the bright flower stones on the four walls also dimmed and lost their color. Too awesome! Upon seeing this, the faint trace of luck in Xiaohua's heart also disappeared without a trace. This magic treasure is definitely not something an aura-refining cultivator can control. Yes, even if it's a foundation-building cultivator, I'm afraid it'll be extremely easy for it to backfire. Quick! The cultivator in the seat of honor recited an incantation and pointed with his finger. The tied bead rapidly shrank and turned into a speck of fluorescent light that fell into his hand. Fellow Taoists, you may place your bids. Just as the voice of the cultivator in the seat of honor fell, a cultivator hurriedly said, "Fellow Taoist, I didn't expect that such a magic treasure would appear in this secret auction, so I didn't prepare enough spirit stones. Is it possible to postpone the bidding for 2 hours?" Fellow Taoist is confused. As long as you enter the secret auction, how can you leave midway? Since fellow Taoist didn't prepare enough spirit stones, that means you don't have fate with this magic treasure. I can't help even if I want to. Alas, forget it. What a pity. That cultivator let out a long sigh and said very dejectedly. The one who spoke was the cultivator who had just won the nascent conception pill. Naturally, he was also a core formation cultivator. Out of the 5 core formation cultivators, only 4 were bidding now. What surprised Xiaohua was that 3 other cultivators also joined in the bidding, and, in the end, only these 3 cultivators were competing to increase the price. So, these 3 are nascent soul cultivators. Xiaohua suddenly came to a realization, and sweat immediately appeared on his forehead. Ever since he started cultivating, he'd only met several nascent soul cultivators. Each and every one of them was a person with remarkable abilities. In front of them, Xiaohua felt that he was just an ant. In this secret auction, among the dozen or so cultivators, there were 5 Jindan cultivators, 3 nascent soul cultivators, and the rest, except for Xiaohua, who was an aura-refining cultivator, were probably all late-stage foundation-building cultivators, right? Fortunately, everyone was wearing mysterious black Taoist robes, so no one knew each other's identity, and no one knew that there was an insignificant existence among them. As expected, the 3 nascent soul cultivators were rich and overbearing. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, only one cultivator won. That cultivator in the seat of honor didn't ask the others if there was anything of similar value, and directly waved his hand. The tied bead flew in front of the winning cultivator and was swallowed by that cultivator. That nascent soul cultivator similarly waved his hand, and a storage pouch flew over. All right, I's 3 items have been completed. Next, it's this fellow Taoist's turn. The cultivator in the seat of honor slightly raised his hand, indicating the cultivator on his left. After these 3 rounds of bidding, Xiaohua already knew that the next cultivator to take out the item should be a core formation cultivator. Moreover, he also participated in the bidding just now, but he didn't succeed. That cultivator placed a brocade box on the table, and said with a smile, "I have a piece of gold fragment here. It's a necessity for refining magic weapons. Which fellow Taoist wants it? I have already seen this item, so I give up my priority right. Fellow Taoists, please make your bids." The cultivator in the seat of honor said. Just like before, there were 3 cultivators bidding. Looking at the situation, 2 of them were foundation-building cultivators, and 1 was a core formation cultivator. As usual, when the 3 people called out the number of spirit stones, that cultivator said, "If any fellow Taoist doesn't have enough spirit stones, you can take out something of equivalent value to exchange." Hearing this, Xiaohua's mind became somewhat active. This piece of gold fragment was exactly as that cultivator said. It was a necessity for refining magic weapons, and the cloud-suppressing seal's exterior was full of holes. If he wanted to repair it, this piece of gold fragment was indispensable. Although he couldn't repair the cloud-suppressing seal right now, he had to prepare all kinds of materials in advance. However, the only valuable things he had on him were the fire essence flame crystals and spiritual herbs. Needless to say, he wouldn't be willing to exchange for the fire essence flame crystals even if he took out the mist-tide beads, so he could only take out spiritual herbs. However, the other party was a core formation cultivator, so the spiritual herbs he wanted naturally had to be of a high grade and had to be of sufficient age. Xiaohua couldn't take out several kinds of spiritual herbs all at once, right? Therefore, after thinking for a moment, Xiaohua took out the stalk of spirit grass, placed it on the table, and pushed it towards that cultivator, saying, "I have something here. I don't know if it's to fellow Taoist's liking." At the same time, another cultivator at the side also pushed a jade box towards that cultivator. The cultivator opened the 2 items and looked at them again and again. He seemed to be hesitating. Soon after, he returned the other cultivator's jade box and put away Xiaohua's spirit grass. A strange voice sounded, "Fellow Taoist, this thing is to my liking. This time, fellow Taoist has gotten a bargain." Xiaohua was overjoyed. Seeing the gold fragments floating in front of his eyes, he put them away with a flick of his sleeve and said inwardly, "Finally, this trip wasn't in vain." Subsequently, 2 magic weapons, several core formation medicinal pills, 2 jade talismans, 3 sets of formation discs and formation talismans, more than 10 demonic beast cores, and even 2 sword pellets were all taken out by the cultivators in succession. Apart from the 2 jade talismans that were taken away by the cultivators with priority, the other items were all exchanged by other cultivators using spirit stones or items. Apart from the jade talismans and sword pellets, Xiaohua didn't have any interest in the other items. However, he was still a bit worried. His spirit grass had already been exchanged. If it was his turn to take out something, wouldn't he have to take out a spiritual herb? A stalk of several thousand years old spirit grass already made Xiaohua somewhat uneasy. Wouldn't it be even more troublesome if there was more? Fortunately, a cultivator in front of Xiaohua said, "I don't dare to take out my item to show my incompetence. Let's wait and see if the other fellow Taoists have anything to exchange." Subsequently, this cultivator didn't take out anything, and it was the turn of the cultivators behind him. Naturally, when it was Xiaohua's turn, Xiaohua followed suit. Just when Xiaohua thought that this secret auction would end so peacefully with him obtaining the gold fragments, there was a little unforeseen event. Chapter 1714. Because on Xiaohua's right side, in addition to 2 gold core cultivators, there was only 1 nascent soul cultivator. The items of those 2 gold core cultivators were very rare. Xiaohua had never heard of them, let alone bid for them. As for the items of nascent soul cultivators, Xiaohua boasted that he didn't have the ability or the financial support. Just as Xiaohua closed his eyes to rest and wait for the first auction of his life to end, the nascent soul stage cultivator coughed and said, "I've already bid for an item and I don't have anything good to take out from my storage bag. However, since it's not easy for everyone to participate, I will make a fool of myself." As he said that, he clapped his hand and took out a long jade box. He placed it on the table and said, "I obtained this when I went to the Meng Mountains a few years ago and accidentally killed a soul cultivator. I don't know which fellow Taoist is interested in it." As soon as his voice fell, the cultivator at the head of the table responded, "Fellow Taoist has such a good item, how can you say that you are making a fool of yourself? I will take a look first." The cultivator at the head of the table opened the jade box and pointed his finger. Gradually, a pale white bone flew out of the jade box. Hearing the word soul cultivator, Xiao Hua was naturally curious. He opened his eyes and saw the white bone. His eyes lit up and he thought to himself, isn't this a white bone from the space? Something that recorded the green seal script? Everyone released their divine sense. Xiao Hua knew that his cultivation base was shallow, so he didn't dare to release his divine sense for fear of revealing any flaws. He could only watch from afar. When he saw the cultivator at the head of the table, he cast a few spells on the white bone. The white bone gradually emitted a faint green brilliance, and thumb-sized characters appeared one after another. Oh, this isn't the green seal script? Xiao Hua's eyes were very sharp. With a glance, he could clearly see that although the faint green characters were somewhat similar to the green seal script, they looked more similar to the cultivation characters of Xiaoyu continent. Haha, this is a soul cultivator's cultivation method. The cultivator at the head of the table grabbed his hand, and the green light on the white bone disappeared. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, you are lucky. I will use my right of priority." The nascent soul cultivator said, although the auction has always prohibited the bidding of cultivation methods, pill formulas, and equipment refining methods, since this is a soul cultivator's cultivation method, it should not be prohibited. Since fellow Taoist has a discerning eye, I naturally won't say anything. What? The secret auction forbids the bidding of cultivation methods? Only now did Xiao Hua understand why there weren't any cultivation methods or pill recipes that he was interested in. Cultivation techniques, pill recipes, and refining methods are too sensitive and can often affect the cultivation structure of the Dawn Rain continent. My secret auction can still be considered as the highest authority in Chiyu City, but it's not enough to be considered as a neutral force in the entire Dawn Rain continent. Besides, the fact that the secret auction could have such an effect was all thanks to the support of fellow cultivators. Ordinary cultivation techniques and pill recipes might not be able to catch your attention. In that case, wouldn't it be better for us to live in harmony? Why do I have to do something that might cause misunderstandings among all the fellow Taoists in my secret auction? The cultivator on the seat of honor said, and this soul cultivator's cultivation method has nothing to do with the orthodoxy of fellow cultivators, so I will accept it according to the rules. After saying that, the cultivator on the seat of honor handed a storage pouch to the nascent soul cultivator. Fellow Taoist, please take a look and see if this number is suitable. If not, I will take out a number that will satisfy fellow Taoist. Idiot, Xiao Hua sighed with emotion. Isn't this just giving people spirit stones? Unexpectedly, the nascent soul cultivator opened the storage pouch and took a look, then said with a smile, the number of spirit stones that fellow Taoist gave is very fair. I am very satisfied. Xiao Hua was dumbfounded. Soon after, the cultivator on the seat of honor put away the white bone and said, Fellow Taoists, do you have any other items to bid? If not, I would like to ask fellow Taoist to... Fellow Taoist, please wait. The nascent soul cultivator put away the storage pouch, then waved his hand and said, I still have a rare item. It seems that fellow Taoist's trip to Millions Mountain Range was very fruitful. The cultivator on the seat of honor was a little surprised. The nascent soul cultivator shook his head and said, Actually, I was doing something else to avoid those soul cultivators. But who knew that something had happened in Meng Mountains? Everything was in chaos, and I had no time to avoid them. So, I had no choice but to kill my way out. Alas, I won't talk about the specific difficulties. As he said that, he clapped his hand and took out a strange oil lamp, placed it on the table and said, According to the soul cultivator that I killed, from the soul-searching technique, their soul cultivator summoned their soul demon from the 10,000 demon realm. This thing should be brought by the soul demon from the 10,000 demon realm. Ah? Xiao Hua was stunned. He'd never heard of it, and even the books of the lightning-controlling sect had never mentioned it. Of course, Xiao Hua came to a sudden understanding right after that. Isn't there no records of the Buddhist sect in the books as well? Didn't it still exist? Obviously, the few Foundation Establishment cultivators and Golden Core cultivators had never heard of it, like Xiao Hua. None of them spoke, or they were waiting for the cultivator on the seat of honor to speak. The cultivator on the seat of honor waved his hand, and the strange oil lamp flew into his hand. The cultivator looked around and pondered for a while, then shook his head and said, "Fellow Taoist, from the material of this oil lamp, I can't tell whether it's something from the 10,000 demon realm. However, the little spiritual fire on the wick shouldn't be something from the Xiaoyu continent. Perhaps the thing that fellow Taoist obtained from the soul searching is true. It's a pity that this thing has been severely damaged. Out of the 10 halts of the main body, 7 halts have been damaged. The fire essence of the spiritual fire in the wick has been destroyed, leaving only the fire shell on the surface. It's completely useless. The only thing that's useful is the 3 drops of oil in the lamp. But what's the use of this oil? I'm afraid that the soul cultivator doesn't know, right?" The cultivator changed the topic. Fellow Taoist is right. The nascent soul cultivator didn't hide it and said with a smile, "That soul cultivator fought I with this thing. If I didn't use my full strength, how could I get this thing? I didn't intend to damage this thing. It's just that this spiritual fire is really powerful. The drop of innate heavy water in I's magic treasure is almost no match for it. This kind of thing is too demonic, I don't dare to use it." The cultivator on the seat of honor waved his hand, and the worn-out oil lamp fell on the table. "Fellow Taoists, take a look and see who wants it." Several foundation establishment cultivators and golden core cultivators listened to the words of the cultivator on the seat of honor. They knew that this thing wasn't something they could use, so they all shut their mouths. Xiao Hua also had the same plan, but when he heard that there was a little spiritual fire on the oil lamp, his heart suddenly became active. However, this spiritual fire had no fire essence, so he hesitated. "Do you want it or not? If you want it, what will you give in exchange?" At this moment, another nascent soul cultivator said, "How about this? I will give a price and take this thing back to sea." As he said this, he waved his hand and threw a storage pouch on the table. Chapter 17:15. This, Xiao Hua, who was originally hesitant, became even more conflicted when he saw a nascent soul cultivator bidding. He couldn't figure out the truth of the matter, whether or not it was as the other party said. He just casually offered a price and brought it back to take a look. If it really was an item that a nascent soul cultivator must have, then he would have ruined the other party's good fortune for no reason. Not only did he fail to cultivate his frigid flame, he would also become an undead in the other party's hands. That was a nascent soul cultivator. He had countless methods to kill Xiao Hua without letting him know. Moreover, Xiao Hua only heard that there was a fire shell of spiritual fire. He also connected it to the fact that he didn't have a pure frigid flame seed. Then, he thought about what Luan Qing said about fire seeds of the 5 elements. Only then did an unimaginable thought appear in his mind. In the future, when I cultivate the light escape technique and temper my bones, I will need to find the so-called 5 elements. Since that's the case, why don't I use this fire shell of spiritual fire to contain the 5 elements? Perhaps it can produce the so-called 5 elements fire seeds? Of course, Xiao Hua's thought was only a possibility, a thought only. If no one bid, Xiao Hua could effortlessly take out a spirit grass of about the same age and obtain it. But now, it seems that this was already an extravagant hope. Fellow Taoists? Is there no one interested in this thing? The nascent soul cultivator chuckled, his voice becoming very strange. Fellow Taoist, I was also curious. I never had the chance to go to Mount Meng, so I wanted to take a look at this thing. If someone really wanted it, wouldn't they have already bid? The nascent soul cultivator laughed. Fine. Just as the nascent soul cultivator was about to speak, Xiao Hua finally couldn't help but speak up like a wronged little wife, that Senior, Junior, has a fire attribute physique. Right now, I'm stuck at a bottleneck. Junior wants to use this spiritual fire to break through the bottleneck. I don't know if Senior can let me pass. What were you doing earlier? The nascent soul cultivator who bid didn't know whether to laugh or cry, cursing, if you bid earlier, why would I bid? Say, Senior, Junior, didn't have anything good, but this thing really attracted Junior, so Junior didn't dare to rashly bid. Xiao Hua's pitiful tone under the black Taoist robe was unpleasant to hear. Motherfucker, you know the price now? Yes, yes, Junior understands. However, Senior, Xiao Hua said bitterly. What do you have in exchange? The nascent soul cultivator from before said disdainfully, although you urgently need this spiritual fire, if there is nothing that I want, how can I give it to you? This nascent soul cultivator clearly knew that Xiao Hua did not have enough spirit stones. Unexpectedly, Xiao Hua didn't hesitate in the slightest. He clapped his hands and took out 2 jade boxes from his storage pouch, handing them over to the 2 nascent soul cultivators respectively. He smiled apologetically and said, "These are the only things Junior has that might be of equal value to this spiritual fire. Senior, please inspect them. In addition, this jade box is Junior's gift to the Senior. Although it isn't precious, it is Junior's token of appreciation. Because of Junior's negligence, Senior has worked hard. Please forgive Senior." When Xiao Hua was speaking just now, he had already thought it through. The other party was a nascent soul cultivator, so the spiritual plants he needed were definitely out of the ordinary. What origin returning grass, Elian green fruit, he shouldn't take them out to make a fool of himself. He had obtained many nameless seeds from 100 Herbs Gates Jiang Fan. Counting them now, they should be more than 10,000 years old. Xiao Hua picked a spiritual plant similar to the divine shadow grass. Xiao Hua had seen this divine shadow grass in ancient records before. It should be a rare spiritual plant in Dawn Rain continent. It had always been a supplementary medicine for nascent soul cultivators to refine nascent formation pills, but even supplementary medicine couldn't be lacking. Naturally, the spiritual plant Xiao Hua gave to that cultivator was not 10,000 years old. When that cultivator saw the divine shadow grass, he was slightly surprised. After a moment, he smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist is considerate. This old man still needs it." But that cultivator didn't say anything about giving the spiritual fire to Xiao Hua. Speaking up to here, he slightly tilted his head. Obviously, this divine shadow grass was very much to his liking. He didn't want to lose this thing, but he also didn't want to offend another nascent soul cultivator because of it. Forget it. The other nascent soul cultivator opened Xiao Hua's jade box and took a look. He smiled and said, "You little cultivator really knows how to curry favor with both sides. Since this spiritual fire is beneficial to you, how can this old man compete with you?" As he spoke, he waved his hand and put the jade box into his arms. "Since you have good intentions, this old man won't hide it from you. This spiritual fire is the fire seed of the 10,000 demon realm. Although it is only a fire shell left, it is not something that cultivators below gold core stage can use. If you are at gold core middle stage, you can use this spiritual fire to break through the bottleneck. If you are at gold core early stage, then think of other ways." Yes, this Junior understands. Hearing that nascent soul cultivator's words, it seemed that even he couldn't see through his own cultivation. Xiao Hua was even more delighted and quickly responded, "This Junior will remember Senior's instructions." This spiritual fire belongs to fellow Taoist. The nascent soul cultivator waved his hand and the broken oil lamp flew in front of Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua waved his hand and the oil lamp disappeared into his space. After the nascent soul cultivator, there were 2 other cultivators who also took out their own things. However, compared to the previous items, they were much worse, so Xiao Hua didn't pay much attention to them. Well, fellow Taoists, this secret auction ends here. 3 years later, if fate wills it, we will meet again. After everyone finished exchanging, the cultivator at the top clapped his hands and laughed. Then, without saying another word, his whole body flew straight up into the sky and disappeared in an instant. Xiao Hua raised his eyes to look. Indeed, at the top of the round table and the corresponding chair, there was a round hole the size of a person. Inside the round hole, a crimson light was faintly discernible. A huge suction force came from the hole, and without Xiao Hua urging his magic power, his entire body was pulled into the round hole. Above the round hole was a small space. Just like when Xiao Hua came, there was also a jade table. On the table, there was a jade plate. Xiao Hua understood that this jade plate should be where the black robe was placed. Xiao Hua was very reluctant to take off the black robe. He didn't know how this robe was made, but even nascent soul cultivators couldn't see through it. Moreover, in the secret auction just now, everyone was wearing the same black robe. To be honest, even if Xiao Hua were to participate in it again, he wouldn't be able to distinguish which cultivator was the one who bid just now. When Xiao Hua placed the robe on the jade plate, he saw a corner of the space suddenly flash with a three-colored brilliance. A layer of runes flashed from the brilliance. This seems to be a transmission array? Xiao Hua scanned the area with his divine sense and immediately sensed the difference between this brilliance and the runes. He didn't dare to be careless and stepped in. When the brilliance and the runes spread, they covered his entire body. As the brilliance flourished, Xiao Hua's entire body disappeared. In a remote area of Weeping Moon City, Xiao Hua's figures suddenly appeared. Before he could react, the brilliance of the teleportation array disappeared again. Xiao Hua calmed himself down, looked around, and saw that there was no trace of a teleportation array under his feet. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Who is hosting this secret auction? Just a temporary teleportation array that can only be used for short-distance teleportation is not something that an ordinary sect can master. Who cares who it is? Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed. He patted his chest very naturally and said with a smile, "This young master has benefited from it." Then, with a sweep of his divine sense, he slowly walked out of the secluded place. This was a remote place in Weeping Moon City, but there were still many shops and shops. Xiao Hua simply strolled around slowly and bought a lot of things. Naturally, he had seen the grand scale of the auction and the secret auction. Xiao Hua's vision had also widened, so he didn't feel too pained when buying materials and pills. Seeing that it was another artifact refinement shop, Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat. He walked in and saw a fourth-layer Qi refinement shop assistant come over to listen respectfully. Xiao Hua looked at the dazzling array of materials and many artifacts under the restriction. He directly asked, "I want to buy a few puppets. Does your shop have them?" "Senior, I'm afraid you've come to the wrong shop." The shop assistant was slightly stunned. Then, he smiled apologetically and said, "My humble shop only provides artifacts and artifact refinement materials. We don't have the puppets that Senior wants. Where can I find them in Weeping Moon City?" Xiao Hua nodded. "To tell you the truth, I'm afraid you can't find them in Weeping Moon City." The shop assistant said without hesitation, "If Senior wants to buy them, you can go to the 7 Skills Sect's shop. Only they have the ability. However, from what I see, they don't seem to have them now." "Thank you, fellow cultivator." Xiao Hua slightly cupped his hands and walked out of the shop. Speaking of puppets, Xiao Hua also thought of them during the secret auction. He only had one puppet. Seeing that the space was getting bigger and there were more spiritual herbs, although he didn't need to take care of them every day, it was still a very tiring task to sort the spiritual herbs and plant them according to their age. One puppet was already not enough. However, although the Dawn Rain continent was big, he had never heard of any sect that specialized in refining puppets. Even the 7 Skills sect, from the shop assistant's tone, didn't have a large number of puppets for sale. Xiao Hua waved his hand to find the spirit camel carriage and quickly rushed back to the inn. The situation in the inn was the same as before. The restrictions on the 3 people's rooms were all open, so he couldn't know if they were all in the room. However, according to Xiao Hua's thoughts, since he had such a situation, those 3 people should be even more interesting than him, right? After entering the room, Xiao Hua opened the restriction and closed his eyes to rest for a while. He couldn't help but take out the worn-out oil lamp. Just as the nascent soul cultivator said, the oil lamp was seriously damaged. There was only a bean-sized flame at the wick and 3 drops of oil at the bottom of the wick. Xiao Hua was naturally not interested in the oil of the lamp, and his gaze was only on the flame. Chapter 1716. The flame of this spiritual fire was very strange. It was not scorching hot like the Samadhi true fire, nor was it burning like the icicle flame. This flame was just quiet, as if it would not move at all, and would not burn at all. Moreover, although the spiritual energy of heaven and earth around the flame was very rich, There was not a trace of it converging into the flame. It was as if the flame was separated from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Xiaohua thought for a moment. Then he took out a small piece of spirit stone from the space and threw it into the flame. The flame was so pure that it was almost transparent. The spirit stone flashed and didn't seem to have any effect on it. This? Xiaohua thought for a long time about the so-called 10,000 demon world's spiritual fire. He also made a lot of guesses about its power, but he never thought that it would be like this. Then, Xiaohua took out a spiritual grass and placed it on top of the spiritual fire. It was still the same, the delicate branches and leaves were not damaged at all in the spiritual fire. What is this? A trace of regret and confusion emerged in Xiaohua's heart, but then he thought again and patted his head. Didn't I say it clearly? This spiritual fire already has no fire essence, only a fire shell, just a shell of spiritual fire. How can it burn? No wonder that nascent soul cultivator let it go so easily. I only took out a 2,000-year-old spiritual grass and fooled him. Xiaohua thought for a moment, and his left hand struck out a technique. It was the fire-controlling technique of the Samadhi true fire. Then he pointed his finger, and the bean-sized flame flew out from the wick of the oil lamp and quietly floated in the air. Good. It's still a flame. Seeing that the spiritual fire could be controlled, Xiaohua was slightly relieved. Then he opened his mouth and spat out the icicle flame. The icicle flame flew to the side of the spiritual fire and burned vigorously. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth, whether it was metal, wood, water, fire, or earth, were all swallowed by it. It was very powerful and formed a sharp contrast with the spiritual fire's stillness. How about I try fusing it? Xiaohua was a bit hesitant. This icicle flame only had a little bit, and the spiritual fire was also only a little bit. If there was any accident, Xiaohua would lose both. But if he did not try, Xiaohua would not give up. Right, can I use the true Samadhi fire? Xiaohua patted his head, and a wisp of Samadhi true fire appeared in his hand. Following a wave of Xiaohua's hand, that tiny wisp of Samadhi true fire gradually approached the spirit fire, and Xiaohua released his Buddha sense. A burst of intense burning sensation appeared when the Buddhist consciousness approached the spiritual fire, causing Xiaohua to involuntarily groan. The pain from the Buddhist sense didn't make Xiaohua nervous. Instead, it gave birth to a trace of excitement. That's right, how bad could a spiritual fire that could burn the Buddhist sense be? Withdrawing his Buddhist sense, Xiaohua only stared at the spiritual fire and the true Samadhi fire. He saw that the true Samadhi fire was nearing the spiritual fire, but there was no reaction at all. The spiritual fire was also different from a transparent one, still motionless in place. The true Samadhi fire entered. Damn it! Xiaohua scolded and raised his head impatiently. But when he raised his head, he felt that something was wrong. He looked left and right, then stared at the spirit fire for a long time, but he didn't notice anything wrong. Suddenly, Xiaohua came to a realization. It wasn't that the true Samadhi fire entered the spirit fire, but he didn't see the true Samadhi fire come out. Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and moved the spirit fire over, but the true Samadhi fire wasn't inside. This spirit fire actually swallowed the true Samadhi fire. Xiaohua was overjoyed, but that transparent spirit fire didn't seem to have any changes at all. Go, go, go! Xiaohua waved his hand in succession, and dozens of true Samadhi fires flew into the spirit fire. The true Samadhi fires that were much bigger than the spirit fire flew into the spirit fire, but the spirit fire still didn't have any changes. Xiaohua frowned slightly. I'm afraid that the true Samadhi fire can't be used as the fire essence of the spirit fire. I wonder if the icicle flame can. When Xiaohua saw the icicle flame, he shook his head slightly, and even had some lingering fear in his heart. He said to himself, it's best not to try blindly for this matter. I didn't think too much about it just now. Fortunately, this true Samadhi fire can't be used as the fire essence. If it could be used as the fire essence, then I wouldn't be able to use it as the five-colored fire seed. Xiaohua understood that this icicle flame was after all a heterogeneous fire seed. If he used it as the fire essence of the spirit fire, it would really be a pity. Previously, he didn't have the spirit fire, but now that he had the opportunity, how could he not consider creating a 5-colored fire seed that was better for him? This icicle flame should be able to cultivate too, right? Xiaohua thought for a moment. It seemed that the Luan family's jade slip didn't say that it couldn't. Thus, Xiaohua sucked in his mouth, and the icicle flame's fire seed flew into his body. Soon after, Xiaohua hesitated a little, and struck a few seals on the spirit fire's fire seed. He sucked in his mouth, and similarly, the spirit fire seed entered his body. Then, he closed his eyes and meditated, and began to slowly cultivate the icicle flame's fire seed. As for the spirit fire's fire seed, it was just as Xiaohua thought. The cultivation seals were all useless. After an unknown number of days, the restriction in Xiaohua's room shook. Chapter 1717. If there's a condensed knowledge treasure, how could they not go? Senior Brother Chang sneered, unless they're idiots. It's still Senior Marshal Brother Chang who strategizes and decides victory from 1,000 miles away. The disciple said respectfully, once the news of the condensed knowledge treasure spread, the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples will definitely fall into Senior Brother Chang's hands. Who said I was the one who spread the news? Senior Brother Chang glanced at the disciple. The disciple was clearly stunned and blurted out, could it be, the news of the condensed knowledge treasure is true? Did I say that it's fake? Senior Brother Chang's lips curled into a smile. Then, that disciple's eyes clearly showed a trace of fanaticism, but before he could finish speaking, Senior Brother Chang mercilessly berated him. You'd better wake up. Even if this condensing knowledge treasure belonged to your previous life, do you think you can escape from the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples after obtaining it? Do you think they'll allow another Foundation establishment or even Golden Core cultivator to appear? The disciple's face immediately showed disappointment, but then he smiled apologetically. I might not be able to, but Senior Brother Chang's talent is exceptional. The condensed knowledge treasure will definitely be Senior Brother Chang's. Mine? Senior Brother Chang laughed loudly and looked at the furnishings in the room. If I could refine the condensed knowledge treasure in my past life, how could I not reach Foundation establishment at the age of 50? Mo Feng, Mo Feng, don't forget, cultivators who can refine treasures all have great fortunes. Even if they reincarnate, how could they be like us? Senior Brother Chang is right, the cultivator called Mo Feng said in a low voice. Of course, if we can't get it, others can't get it so easily. Senior Brother Chang said fiercely, even if I can't use it, I will still put it in my storage bag and admire it for the rest of my life. Yes, disciple understands. Mo Feng smiled apologetically. However, since the condensed knowledge treasure has appeared, not to mention the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples, the 4 of them are all at the 12th level of Qi refining. Obviously, they came out to travel and prepare to break through. Disciples from other sects with some background should also go, right? With our cultivation, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for us to deal with them. That's what I should worry about. Senior Brother Chang sneered, you just need to do your own thing. Disciple understands, disciple understands. Mo Feng said hurriedly, disciple will go back now. Then you go. Senior Chang nodded, indicating for Mo Feng to leave immediately. After that, he sat on the cloud bed for a while before hurriedly leaving the secret room. 10 days later, in the southwest of Weeping Moon City, in a desolate place, above the scorched earth, Xiaohua and the other 3 were leisurely hurrying along. The 4 of them formed a shape, with Xiaohua and Qian Diheng flying in the front, Sun Shu and Kun Fian flying behind. Qian Diheng flew on the right side of Xiaohua, slightly behind. His eyes looked at Xiaohua from time to time, as if he wanted to see something from Xiaohua's body. When Xiaohua sensed something and turned his head, Qian Diheng hurriedly looked ahead. If it was a beautiful female cultivator, Xiaohua might be complacent, but Qian Diheng was a man, so Xiaohua naturally knew what he was thinking. He could only smile bitterly in his heart. Because after Xiaohua got the new consumable magic treasure from the workshop, Qian Diheng asked Xiaohua for a token that could be used to refine magic tools in the workshop. After all, the workshop only looked at tokens and didn't recognize people, so this token was the most important. But the problem was, Xiaohua still needed to use this token to refine magic tools, so how could he return it to Qian Diheng? What kind of magic tool needs a year to refine? At that time, Qian Diheng was shocked, but then he thought of magic tools. However, thinking about Xiaohua's background as a loose cultivator and also a disciple of the myriad Thunder Valley with no foundation, he was puzzled. Not to mention that magic tools were hard to find. Even the spirit stones needed to refine magic tools were something that Xiaohua couldn't take out. Xiaohua's answer was very hesitant. He only said that the master refiner of the workshop had said that he would return the token to Qian Diheng after a year. Although Qian Diheng didn't ask any more, he was still worried. Could it be that this guy really has spirit stones? Taking the cloud-suppressing seal back to the furnace and refining it again? Xiaohua replied to Qian Diheng, but in his heart, he was really moved by the craftsmanship of the workshop. The consumable magic tool was stored in his space, and it was completely different from the previous spear-shaped magic tool. This was a 3-inch long rhombus-shaped magic tool. There was a green and red brilliance on it, and its surface was abnormally bright. Faintly, there were strange runes flashing on it. Moreover, this magic tool had another wonderful feature, which was that it could be seen clearly with the naked eye, but when one's divine sense swept over it, it was actually empty. I'm afraid this is the effect of the lizard's bones, Xiaohua thought. I didn't think that the bones and flesh of spirit beasts could be used like this. And that cultivator also had some spirit beast bones in his hands, and this magic tool also had some refined ones. According to what that cultivator said, I can use this magic tool to kill an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator with my 12th stage qi refining cultivation, but my real cultivation has reached the middle stage qi refining cultivation, then wouldn't I be able to kill a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator with this magic tool? Although it's only a few % chance, it's still better than having no chance at all. Xiaohua's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. Unfortunately, this magic tool, there's only one. Moreover, it can only be used once. If only I could use it more than once. Junior brother Xiao, what are you thinking about? Qian Diheng finally spoke. Hee, nothing, I just saw that senior brother Qian is always looking at me. I'm surprised. Xiaohua said with a smile. Qian Diheng grinned and scanned with his spirit sense. He frowned and said, this place is a bit desolate. I'm afraid we'll reach the Liqian mountain range a few hundred miles ahead. Let's take a rest first and discuss this. Afterwards, Qian Diheng waved his hand and landed on a bald peak first. Sun Shu and the others also landed. Kun Fian asked curiously, it's still early, is junior brother Qian going to rest again? We came out from Weeping Moon City's teleportation array and went through several teleportations. We just flew for a few days, how can I be tired? Qian Diheng raised his eyebrows and said unhappily, I'm at the late stage of qi refining cultivation, I'm not as weak as before. Sun Shu looked around and said thoughtfully, this place is already close to the Liqian mountain range. And that's right. Xiaohua said with a smile, senior brother Qian wants to discuss something. Discuss what? Kun Fian asked curiously, just fly there directly. There are many spirit beasts in the Liqian mountain range, our cultivation. I'm afraid it's not enough. Xiaohua said. Sun Shu thought for a moment and shook his head slightly. If we take a detour, I'm afraid we won't have enough time to reach Jiangqing City in time. According to it's better to fly there directly. That's right. We are here to travel in order to break through to the next realm. This kind of dangerous place is the best place for us to go. How can we take a detour? Kun Fian also raised his eyebrows and said, very excited. Xiaohua was silent, knowing that this was also a knot in the hearts of the three. He could only persuade in a low voice, then we still need to discuss and find a suitable route. That's what I'm thinking. Qian Diheng said with a smile. Then the four of them sat down cross-legged and recovered their spiritual power. After the four of them rested for a while, Sun Shu discussed with Qian Diheng and Kun Fian for a while. Xiaohua understood that although the Liqian mountain range wasn't particularly big, it had a radius of tens of thousands of miles. There were many extremely fierce spirit beasts whose strength was comparable to Foundation establishment, especially the spirit stones in the depths of the mountain range, which were more than gold core. Although they had to fly over the periphery of the Liqian mountain range, the spirit beasts there were much weaker, but it was still very difficult to pass through quietly. According to the sex records, in the direction of the Liqian mountain range, there are the most green pythons, which are first-grade spirit beasts, the same strength as us. Sun Shu had obviously done his homework and explained, however, green pythons usually live in groups. Hundreds and thousands of green pythons would give even Foundation establishment masters a headache. The skin, bones, core and flesh of green pythons are all good things. Kun Fian's eyes shone. Snake venom can also be refined into antidote pills and poison pills. Qian Diheng also said. However, Sun Shu frowned, the problem is, we can't directly face hundreds of green pythons. Hee, is there still a need to say? Qian Diheng laughed strangely and turned to look at Xiao Hua. Our junior brother Zhao's flying speed is so fast, isn't it just right to use him to lure the snakes? No way. Xiao Hua saw the three people looking at him with tacit understanding and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Junior brother Xiao will use you. Sun Shu covered his mouth and laughed. Who asked your flying speed to be the fastest among us? Moreover, you dared to go deep into the Liqian mountain range alone. It's the most beneficial for your state of mind and cultivation. Who knows, you might be able to find the opportunity to build your foundation in today's danger. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and laughed. Fine, since I'm going to lure the snakes, then, how do we calculate the share? You stingy brat. Qian Diheng heard and immediately had a look of disdain. You haven't even started to work and you're already bargaining. Really not enough. However, just as his voice fell, Qian Diheng blinked his eyes and said, how about this? You've done a meritorious deed by luring the snakes. You can get 20% more of the things after killing the green pythons. Deal? Xiao Hua was very happy, as if he had gotten a great bargain. Strange, no matter how I look at it, it seems as if I've fallen into a trap. Qian Diheng was rather puzzled. Kun Fian rolled his eyes at him and said, Junior brother Xiao is so benevolent. If you don't give him more points, how could he not go? What he means is that he wants to pick first, right? Junior brother Xiao, is it like this? Qian Diheng pulled Xiao Hua's Taoist robe and said, Fusitsu. Xiao Hua's face was serious. The green python skin is a refining material, the more the better. Xiao Hua previously didn't think that the remains of spirit beasts could be used to refine tools, so he didn't calculate before. Now that he understood, how could he give up? Alright, since we've finished our discussion and have divided our work, we'll go and kill the green pythons. Sun Shu smiled like a flower, as if the green pythons with refining qi cultivation were already in her bag. Chapter 17-18. The Liqian mountain range looked very desolate from afar, but when he got closer, Xiao Hua discovered that under the rough mountain rocks and sand, there was a thin layer of vegetation. It was just that this vegetation was not green, and was similar to the color of the surrounding mountain rocks, making it difficult to distinguish with the naked eye. Moreover, there was a kind of short tree on the mountain ridge. This tree was only about 2 zhang tall, but its trunk was thick. It needed more than 10 people to hug it. Xiao Hua did not fly high, nor was his speed fast. He only released his divine sense and flew towards the depths of Liqian mountain range. Didn't you say we would pass through Liqian mountain range? How come we haven't even arrived yet and they're already thinking about the green pythons? Is this for experience or to accumulate spirit stones? Xiao Hua flew for several li before coming to a realization. Sun Shu and the others had made it clear that the green pythons were extremely fast, and many of them could fly. Xiao Hua only needed to lure no more than 4 green pythons out of the group, and the 4 of them were confident that they could kill them all. Is there a need for 4 people? With this young master's cloud-suppressing seal, won't these green pythons be in the bag? Xiao Hua did not put these green pythons in his eyes. After flying for a while, the mountain range below them changed a little. It gradually became moist and a slight fishy wind rose in the air. Xiao Hua frowned. knowing that the place where the green pythons lived was not far away. Could it be here? In his divine sense, a few li ahead was a place where the trees were slightly lush. A thick fog covered the forest, and the ground was covered with grayish-white vegetation. However, this vegetation was worn bare, which was obviously the reason why the pythons often appeared. When he flew closer, Xiao Hua's figure landed and used his hand to pinch his chin, thinking about how to lure the snakes. At this moment, a few ear-piercing screams came from the fog. There are other cultivators? Xiao Hua was surprised and swept his divine sense, but when he saw the situation in the fog, he could not help but be surprised. At the edge of the fog, there were 4 or 5 people in martial arts clothes, holding different weapons in their hands. Some were swords, some were sabers, and some were spears. They were surrounding a 3-zhang-long snake and were engaged in a life-and-death struggle. The snake's body was dark green and was 3 feet thick. On the snake's head, which was larger than an ox's head, there were 2 snake eyes emitting a cold light. Behind the snake, on the ground not far away, there were more than 10 skeletal corpses, each of them missing an arm or a leg. It was a tragic sight. Just as Xiao Hua was watching, the long snake hissed and spat out a mouthful of faint mist that sprinkled on the heads of the 2 people in front of him. The 2 people's faces were filled with panic, but they didn't seem to be able to take out any yellow talismans. Instead, they waved their hands and struck the air with their palms. Every time they struck, they seemed to be able to disperse some of the mist. But in the end, there was too much mist, and a lot of it landed on their bodies and faces. Another series of blood-curdling screams could be heard. As soon as the 2 men's skin came into contact with the mist, small blisters immediately appeared on their skin. Following that, wisps of white smoke rose from their bodies. It was obvious that they were in extreme pain. The 2 men could not help but throw away the saber and spear in their hands. They stretched out their hands to scratch at the blisters. However, the moment they did so, their entire skin was torn apart. Black blood flowed from their faces and necks. Just as the 2 people screamed and fell to the ground, the snake curled its tail and swept the 2 people on the left, who were somewhat dazed, to the ground. Immediately, blood spurted out from the 2 people's mouths. It was obvious they were dead. The 2 people's swords and spears were simply unable to block the attack of the snake's tail. The 4 people died extremely quickly. Xiao Hua simply did not have time to make a move. However, seeing the methods of the 5 people, a thought emerged in Xiao Hua's mind. These people are not cultivators. Sure enough, there was only 1 person left. Seeing that his companions had died, how could he dare to stay? He put away the sword in his hand, spread his body, and fled towards the outside of the thick fog. This is Qinggong? Xiao Hua saw that person's feet were nimble and his body was as light as a swallow, and couldn't help but groan. He thought of the identity he sometimes used to dodge cultivators' attacks. Naturally, in Xiao Hua's eyes, this person's movement technique was full of flaws and abnormally clumsy. How could the snake let this person escape? The snake's head swayed, and its entire body swayed. Unexpectedly, it was not slower than that person's Qinggong as it chased after him. That person's face was pale. He simply didn't dare to look behind him. He lowered his head and ran toward Xiao Hua. Just as that person came out of the thick fog, the snake behind him had already caught up. The snake's scarlet tongue was about to bite that person's back. Suddenly, the shadow of a sword flashed past that person's ear. That person was so frightened that his legs went soft and he fell to the ground, paralyzed. The snake hissed. Immediately, the man saw the thick snake tail sweep over his head and hit the thick tree next to him. The thick tree was broken by the snake with a kachich sound. The tree fell to the ground with a boom sound, and the long snake's tail was pressed down on the ground. The snake's tail moved a few times, as if it wanted to move but was unable to. Soon after, it stopped moving. That person was clearly stunned. Immediately after, he looked at the snake's head behind him in disbelief. He saw that the snake's head had already been smashed to pieces. On the ground next to the snake's head, the sword embryo of a long sword lay there, stained with blood. Which hero saved this humble one? That person clearly understood. He rolled and crawled up, cupped his hands and shouted. Not far away, on top of a tree, Xiaohua crossed his arms and looked at this person with interest. That person's gaze fell on Xiaohua's young face. It was quite inconceivable. He bowed and said, "This humble one is Zhang Xuyang of Southern Wind. I wonder which of the 5 immortals of Wulin is the benefactor who saved this humble one?" The 5 immortals of Wulin? Xiaohua's eyes turned. His figure floated down from the tree. He didn't use the slightest bit of transcendence energy, only the misty steps. 8 steps hurrying the wind? Zhang Xuyang saw Xiaohua's qinggong and immediately showed astonishment. He said, "The benefactor is Southern Wind Su Bingyi?" But then Zhang Xuyang shook his head and said, "Great hero Su is an old man in his 60s. Could it be that the benefactor is a descendant of great hero Su?" Hee. Xiaohua laughed and put away the great wisdom sword. Soon after, his divine sense swept and said, "This is not a place to stay for long. Come with me." Saying this, Xiaohua pulled Zhang Xuyang. Still using the qinggong technique, he quickly brought him to a place. After waiting for Xiaohua for a while, several green pythons that were clearly much larger than this long snake rushed over. They circled around the long snake's corpse for a long time. Soon after, they ate the several people's corpses and dragged the long snake's corpse back into the forest. Chapter 1719. Benefactor's qinggong is truly superb. You have really broadened my horizons. On top of a mountain, Zhang Xuyang said with admiration, "Su Bingyi's 8 steps chasing the wind is comparable to benefactor's. Benefactor, please bestow a name." "I am a nameless person in the forest. Even if I say my name, Zhang Daxia wouldn't know." Xiaohua waved his hand and said, "Who would have thought that Zhang Xuyang would turn over and kowtow and said, 'Benefactor saved my life, how can I not remember benefactor's name? If so, wouldn't I be worse than a pig or a dog? How can I stand in the martial arts world?'" This Xiaohua slightly shook his head. "I am Xiaohua. Benefactor Xiaohua." Zhang Xuyang was helped up by Xiaohua. He shed tears of gratitude and said, "With Benefactor Zhao's skills, even if you are in the wild forest, you should be famous in Jianghu." "How? I have never heard of your name?" "I still haven't traveled Jianghu," Xiaohua said with a smile. He said Jianghu very smoothly. "It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. After today, I will proclaim Benefactor Zhao's righteousness in Jianghu. Moreover, Benefactor Xiao will follow me back. Within a few months, everyone in Jianghu will hear of Benefactor Zhao's name." Zhang Xuyang patted his chest and said, "How could Xiaohua travel Jianghu?" He just wanted to know how he knew qinggong, so he said with a smile, "Traveling Jianghu is not urgent. I will first understand the situation in Jianghu." "How about it?" "Of course, what does Benefactor want to know?" Zhang Xuyang asked in agreement. "What?" Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "Then tell me about the 5 immortals of Wulin." Benefactor, these 5 immortals of Wulin are all pre-celestial masters. East Thunder, West Rain, South Wind, North Fire, Yin and Yang are called the 5 immortals of Wulin. East Thunder is Lei Huming. His thunder body technique is complete. Ordinary weapons can't hurt him. West Rain is Water Jade Graceful. Her Morning Wind Rain internal energy has been cultivated to perfection. There are few opponents in Jianghu. South Wind Su Bingyi's 8 steps chasing the wind is the number 1 qinggong in Jianghu. Oh, now that Benefactor has set foot in Jianghu, his title of number 1 will be in danger. Go on. Xiaohua smiled. West Fire is Ma Ming. His fire dragon divine art is invincible. Other than Wang Chong who can restrain him, others can only fight to a draw with him. Then why is Wang Chong called Zhong Yin Yang? Benefactor, please know that these 5 heroes are located in 5 different directions. Wang Chong is proficient in the 9 Yin and 9 Yang divine arts, so he is located in the middle. Moreover, his martial arts are the highest, so he is known as the central Yin Yang. I see. When Xiaohua heard this, he didn't seem to recall anything. Instead, he became even more confused. This was a world that had nothing to do with him. "Oh, by the way, Benefactor Xiao, do you always live here?" Or are you going to the Luofeng mountain to participate in the sword conference? Seeing Xiaohua frown, Zhang Shuyang hurriedly said, I wanted to participate in the sword conference, so I remembered that Qingyang Mountain has a snake gallbladder that can increase internal strength. So I boldly invited a few friends to come and try my luck, but in the end, Luofeng Mountain Sword Conference? Xiaohua asked curiously, is it a very famous sword conference in Jianghu? It seems that benefactor is really not a person of Jianghu. Zhang Shuyang grinned and said, the Luofeng Mountain Sword Conference will be held in Luofeng Mountain in 2 months. It is a sword conference that only happens once every 10 years. The 5 immortals of Wulin were ranked 10 years ago, and this year is the sword conference. I don't know if the 5 immortals' name will be shaken by others. By the way, benefactor Xiao, if you go, you will definitely be ranked among the 5 immortals. Where is Luofeng Mountain? Xiaohua's heart was moved. This Zhang Shuyang can't say anything. Maybe he can get something from those Xiantian masters, and maybe it is related to his life. When Zhang Shuyang said it, Xiaohua was even more happy. This Luofeng Mountain is actually on his way to Mingxi. At this time, there is still a long time until 2 months. If he wants to go, he can definitely go. Hero Zhang, can you show me your sex martial arts? Xiaohua hesitated and somewhat pleaded. This Zhang Shuyang also hesitated, but then he smiled and said, Benefactor Zhao's Qin Gong is profound. Although I have not seen Benefactor's martial arts, but just by looking at the leopard through a tube, I can tell that you must be a peerless master. I am really showing off my slight skill in front of an expert. But then, Zhang Shuyang changed the topic. Although my sex martial arts cannot be taught to outsiders, but in front of benefactor, there is nothing to hide. It is only right that I show you. Thank you for your trouble, Hero Zhang. Xiaohua understood in his heart, but he still wanted to see if the so-called martial arts could evoke his memory, so he had to bite the bullet and say it. Benefactor, please look. Zhang Shuyang cupped his fists and then started to display his martial arts moves one by one. At first, Xiaohua was watching with great interest, but the more he watched, the more he frowned. Not to mention that these moves were full of flaws. There were many times when they could obviously attack in the air, but they chose to attack from the side. There was obviously a flaw that could be made up for with a method, but they didn't. Moreover, these moves, in Xiaohua's eyes, didn't seem to have any reaction. It was as if he was watching a child baring his fangs and brandishing his claws while playing. Alas, the moves of the martial arts world are nothing more than the realm that secular people pursue. How can they be compared with cultivators? Xiaohua was disappointed, but he suddenly smiled. If you can attack in the air, then you must be in midair. How can secular people fly? Even aura-refining cultivators have to use flying talismans, right? The two can't be mentioned in the same breath. While Zhang Shuyang was practicing, he peeked at Xiaohua's expression. When he saw Xiaohua's disappointed face, he became even more fearful. He knew that his martial arts weren't in Xiaohua's eyes. After he concealed his martial arts moves, he said very respectfully, Benefactor Xiao, this humble one's insignificant martial arts won't be able to enter Benefactor's discerning eyes. I've let Benefactor see a joke. It's nothing. It's very good. Xiaohua quickly waved his hand and said, I wonder what kind of inner strength cultivation method Benefactor is practicing? Zhang Shuyang tried to ask. Xiaohua rolled his eyes and scratched his head with his hand. He had a plan in his heart and said with a smile, This humble one doesn't know what I'm practicing. I only know some random moves. How about this humble one demonstrate some of them? Hero Zhang, can you help me take a look? That's naturally good. This humble one will wait and see. Zhang Shuyang was overjoyed. Xiaohua thought for a moment and his hands and feet began to move. Some vague and scattered moves were slowly displayed. Unfortunately, these moves weren't coherent. Some were even displayed halfway and forgotten. Seeing this, Zhang Shuyang's face was full of embarrassment. He didn't know how to evaluate. This humble one only remembers so much. Xiaohua withdrew his hands and feet. With a face full of expectation, he asked, I wonder what Hero Zhang can see? This Zhang Shuyang shook his head slightly, Benefactor Zhao's moves are really broad and profound. The implication is far from what this humble one can guess. This humble one doesn't dare to evaluate. Hero Zhang, don't flatter this humble one. Xiaohua waved his hand and asked, Hero Zhang has been in Jianghu for many years. Have you ever seen a move similar to this humble one's? At this point, Zhang Shuyang's eyes lit up and he said with a smile, if Benefactor didn't mention it, this humble one really couldn't remember. Benefactor's moves seem to be somewhat similar to Eastern Thunder's Lei Huming's Thunder Body technique. However, the moves are still quite different. Of course, this humble one's martial arts is far inferior to Eastern Thunder's. Maybe I remember wrongly. Great. Xiao Hua beamed with joy. Maybe this humble one's master is related to Eastern Thunder? That should be the case. Zhang Shuyang said with a smile. If Benefactor has a relationship with Eastern Thunder, this Jianghu is huge. Will Eastern Thunder's Lei Huming also participate in the Luofeng Mountain Sword Conference? Of course, this once-in-a-decade sword conference is famous all over the world. Eastern Thunder will definitely go. If Benefactor Xiao doesn't mind, this humble one is willing to serve you and take you to Luofeng Mountain. Hee, this humble one has other things to do. Luofeng Mountain? Let's talk about it after the other things are done. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Zhang Shuyang was anxious. Benefactor Xiao, Luofeng Mountain is very far from here. Although we martial arts people have Qinggong, it's about right for us to rush there from Qingyang Mountain. If Benefactor Xiao goes to do other things first, I'm afraid it'll be too late to go to Luofeng Mountain. It doesn't matter, this humble one naturally has a plan. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said with a smile, Hero Zhang, you'd better hurry. This place is dangerous, it's not good to stay for long. Benefactor Xiao won't follow me down the mountain? Zhang Shuyang asked with disappointment. I won't go, let's part ways here. Xiao Hua smiled and also cupped his fists. After saluting Zhang Shuyang, he went in another direction and used his Qinggong. Seeing Xiao Hua leave like smoke, Zhang Shuyang sighed with emotion. I don't know which sect this unworldly expert is from. He's so humble and has such great martial arts. Even Wang Chong, who is known as the world's #1 expert, can't compare to him. It's a pity that I can't make friends with him, it's really a pity. Then, Zhang Shuyang hurriedly used his Qinggong and left in another direction. Xiao Hua went to a place where Zhang Shuyang couldn't see. His divine sense saw that he had left, so he turned around and flew toward the green python. He didn't expect to see another world here, a martial arts world, a Jianghu. It was the first time Xiao Hua heard of this Jianghu, but it was so familiar, as if he himself came from Jianghu. Could it be, before I lost my memory, before I was rescued by my master to Yellow Flower Ridge, I was a Jianghu person? The reason I lost my memory was because I encountered something in Jianghu? The more Xiao Hua thought about it, the more likely it was. After all, Xiao Hua didn't cultivate. Moreover, his body was light and strong, and he knew some martial arts moves. Wasn't this the characteristic of a Jianghu person that Zhang Shuyang mentioned? The Luofeng Mountain Sword Conference is a grand event for Jianghu people. Presumably, all the Jianghu people with backgrounds will participate. If I came from Jianghu, as long as I appeared on Luofeng Mountain, someone would definitely recognize me. However, I'm afraid I can't let Qian Di Heng and the others know about this. Chapter 1720. When Xiao Hua arrived at the place where he killed the azure python, he only saw blood and some bones on the ground. Nothing else could be seen. This azure python is indeed powerful. In just a short while, other azure pythons came over. I don't know what Zhang Shuyang and the others were thinking. They dared to come to Li Qian Mountain Range with such insignificant skills? In their mouths, it's just Green Sun Mountain. Xiao Hua sighed inwardly. He clapped his hands and took out some defensive yellow talismans. Then he flew into the thick fog. There was an extremely fishy smell in the thick fog. The trees and vegetation in the fog were all corroded into a different appearance. Xiao Hua's body was covered in a layer of faint brilliance that protected him. All the poisonous gas and water couldn't get close to him. Ouch! Xiao Hua's divine sense passed through. He had already seen that the mountain range ahead was even more continuous. Those thick trees were also even denser. Many streams also began to appear. In these places covered by the thick fog, many azure pythons of various sizes filled the area. So many azure pythons? Xiaohua was really flabbergasted. Not only were there 3 zhang-long pythons swimming or resting on the trees, there were also many huge azure pythons lying on the mountain range. When Xiaohua was about to use his divine sense to scan the depths, many emotionless and cold divine senses also emerged from the depths of the mountain range and directly welcomed him. There were even dozens of divine senses that were even more powerful than Xiaohua's divine sense. This is bad. Xiaohua was alarmed. He knew that he had alarmed the azure pythons inside and immediately withdrew his divine sense. Following his divine sense, more than 10 huge shadows actually flew out from the depths of the mountain range. Looking at their speed, they were actually a bit faster than refinement realm cultivators. I was wondering why Qian Diheng and the others didn't dare to rashly come over. It turns out I can't use my divine sense too much. Xiaohua promptly released his Buddhist sense, but as before, the azure pythons were actually more powerful than cultivators. They very easily discovered Xiaohua's Buddhist sense and flew towards Xiaohua's direction. Spiritual beings are indeed spiritual beings. They are naturally more sensitive than cultivators. Xiaohua no longer dared to be careless. He formed hand seals and his body sank into the ground. Fortunately, the green azure python's divine sense scanned the area mercilessly and couldn't find any trace of Xiaohua. It flew around for a moment before flying back. On the ground, hundreds and thousands of green azure pythons of various sizes quickly swam over and then quickly followed the green azure python back. Xiaohua didn't dare to release his divine sense again. He fled underground for a while before sneaking his head out. Fortunately, Xiaohua was in a bright place and there weren't any green pythons. However, there were a lot of sparkling water threads on the plants on the ground, making Xiaohua feel nauseous. Xiaohua carefully released his divine sense bit by bit. He saw that around 10 green pythons were coiled around a boulder 10 zhang away. These green pythons were clearly 10 times larger than the one Xiaohua had killed. Outside their huge scales, there was already a faint mist. Moreover, the moment Xiaohua's divine sense touched these green pythons, they immediately sensed it. They abruptly raised their snake heads, and their fist-sized snake eyes emitted a cold light as they looked in Xiaohua's direction. "Granny, these are not to be trifled with." Xiaohua formed an incantation gesture, and his figure flashed into a large tree on the left. However, just as his figure disappeared, there was another flash of brilliance, and he retreated from inside. As it turned out, this large tree was actually hollow, and there were extremely many tiny green pythons wandering around. Although these didn't affect Xiaohua's would escape, Xiaohua really couldn't see these densely packed little insects. After searching for a while, Xiaohua found 6 green pythons under a mountain ridge. These green pythons were only 60 to 70 zhang long. Moreover, when Xiaohua's divine sense swept over, it didn't attract their attention. Obviously, they didn't produce divine sense. Presumably, their strength was around the 11th layer of qi refining. "Forget it, I'll take them." Xiaohua made up his mind and drilled out from the ground. First, he thought of a way to escape. Then, he released the black iron needle and stabbed it towards one of the green pythons. Although the green python's skin was sturdy, it couldn't compare to the black iron needle. This stab naturally aroused the green python's vigilance. Immediately, the green python's head stood up from the ground. The scarlet snake's tongue flicked rapidly, and the snake's eyes swept left and right. With a zing sound, the black iron needle once again pierced towards the green python's left eye. That green python was very agile. It slightly shook its head and actually easily dodged the black iron needle. Amazing! Xiaohua secretly sighed. He controlled the black iron needle to slide on the green python's skin. See la la, a burst of tiny sparks flashed. This time, the python's skin didn't suffer any damage. However, as the black iron needle flew back, the green python was clearly somewhat angry. With SI sound, that green python hissed and chased after the needle. At the same time, the other pythons also swam over. It's really fast. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly used Earth Escape while controlling the black iron needle to retreat according to the path he just took. However, before he could even travel halfway, that green python actually stopped and prepared to return. How could Xiaohua let them return? The black iron needle once again flew over and directly pierced another green python's vital point. Although it didn't kill that green python, it thoroughly angered it. With an SI sound, that green python chased after the black iron needle without regard for anything else. Xiaohua was overjoyed and hurriedly fled back. Along the way, the 6 or 7 green pythons encountered several groups of green pythons that were resting. Although the majority of the green pythons looked strangely at the few green pythons that quickly left and didn't pay them any attention, there were also a few green pythons that seemed to like liveliness that joined in. When Xiaohua used Earth Escape to the edge of the dense fog, there were already close to 20 green pythons in the group. No wonder Qian Diheng and the others didn't come to lure the snakes. If this young master didn't know Earth Escape, wouldn't this young master have been discovered by many green pythons along the way? Xiaohua gradually understood that when faced with so many green pythons that had strength similar to a Qi refining stage 12 cultivator, other than being able to escape with speed, it was really hard to say. After coming out of the thick fog, the azure pythons were somewhat hesitant. Xiaohua could only fly out of the ground and throw a small ice thorn talisman at them. Without making too much noise, it angered many azure pythons. There were even 2 azure pythons that could float in the air that chased at the front while shaking their heads and wagging their tails. Haha, 3 senior martial brothers, hurry up and make your move. Xiaohua immediately shouted loudly after luring 20 green pythons into the previously agreed-upon area. Sun Shu and the others had already used their divine sense to see, and each of them revealed themselves. Qian Diheng shouted loudly, "Junior martial brother Xiao, I told you to lure the snakes, why did you lure so many? These green pythons all have strength around Qi refining stage 11. If even one of them escapes, our plan will be ruined." Chapter 1721. Qian Diheng's words sounded like he was complaining about Xiaohua, but his tone was filled with excitement. Qian Diheng himself knew how difficult it was to attract 20 green pythons without a sound. Moreover, these green pythons were only around the 11th layer of Qi refining. Although there were many of them, it wasn't difficult for them. After all, the 4 disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect could fly, and these green pythons could only float in the air at most. They couldn't pose any threat to them, and the biggest possibility was that the 4 of them couldn't kill all of these green pythons, and let some of these green pythons escape, attracting more green pythons. Then, the benefits they could obtain would be much less. You can use your methods. This little brother guarantees that none of these green pythons will escape. Xiaohua laughed loudly, his figure flashing, passing by the group of green pythons and appearing behind the green pythons. These green pythons clearly had some intelligence. When they saw the 3 cultivators appear in front of them, they immediately split into 4 groups, hissing, spitting their tongues and rushing towards the 4 of them. Kun Fian's artifact was a string of jade beads. It was called the thunder trapping bead. She flew in the air and tossed out the thunder trapping bead. Instantly, it expanded and a brilliant ball of light enveloped the 4 green pythons that were swimming over. The green pythons' eyes reflected the brilliance of the thunder trapping bead, but they didn't seem to be moved, and didn't have any fear at all. These 4 green pythons simultaneously raised their heads from the ground, straightening half of their bodies. They were about 40 to 50 feet tall, not much lower than Kun Fian's flying height. Hiss! The pythons opened their mouths at the same time, and countless stinking poisonous fog sprayed out, enveloping the shining thunder-trapping bead. Quick! Kun Fian saw this, and instead of being shocked, she was happy. Forming a spell, she pointed her finger, and the thunder-trapping bead produced a strong suction force, and in the blink of an eye, the thick poisonous fog was sucked in completely. Kun Fian knew that this poisonous fog was the poison of the green pythons. It was extremely poisonous, and was one of the benefits they wanted on this trip. After the 4 green pythons finished spitting out the poisonous mist, they were not as listless as other ordinary poisonous snakes. Instead, they were even more excited. Their entire bodies twisted, and their snake tails, which were nearly 4 zhang long, whipped towards the thunder-trapping bead with lightning speed. The incomparably hard python skin struck the thunder-trapping beads, causing the light on the thunder-trapping beads to flicker a little. Then, the beads actually sank down a foot or so from midair. This green python was indeed powerful. Not only are they strong, but their skin is also tough. If my thunder-trapping bead wasn't supported by a formation, it would have been broken by them. Cultivation was shocked at the strength of the azure pythons, but he was also glad. These pythons were only 10 feet long, and were obviously not the strongest among the azure pythons. And since the azure pythons' tails were able to move the thunder confining pearl, then their python skin would naturally be good stuff. Cultivation took a deep breath, and once again activated his Fa, raising up the thunder-trapping beads that had been struck down. Once again, they let out light, and the 4 azure pythons once again spat out the poisonous mist. Sun Shu's magic tool was similar to Cultivation's. It was called the Thunder Lock, and its shape was a small lock. Under the activation of his Fa, it was about a foot long. It also had a suction force, and could also use the power of lightning. After absorbing the poisonous mist spat out by the azure pythons, Sun Shu rubbed his hands together, pouring his Fa into it. From the thunder lock, a bolt of lightning suddenly flashed out, striking the python that was floating in midair. The strong power of lightning struck the 10-foot-long azure python down from midair, and a burst of green smoke came out from the python. That azure python writhed on the ground for a moment, but did not move. When the other azure pythons saw this, they immediately had the intention to retreat. As their tails twitched, they quickly swam towards the direction of the dense fog. Sun Shu frowned, and with a clap of his hand, several ice seal talismans appeared, and with a wave of his hand he sent them towards the azure pythons. Who knew that the azure pythons could actually sense the movement of the yellow talismans? Before the ice seal talismans hit them, they each swung their tails. Pa-pa-poch sounds rang out, and the yellow talismans were actually smashed into pieces, turning into talisman papers that fell to the ground. This is troublesome. When Sun Shu saw this, he threw out another handful of confinement talismans. This time, some of the azure pythons used their tails, some turned their heads, and spat out a mouthful of poisonous mist. When the poisonous mist landed on the light of the confinement talismans, it was like pouring cold water on a flame, corroding the light and turning it into broken talisman papers that fell to the ground. Truly powerful. Sun Shu was a bit flabbergasted. Even the ice seal talismans and confinement talismans were not afraid. This really was the strength of the 11th layer of Qi refining. At this moment, her lightning lock had already flown over. Sun Shu's hand seal had already been completed, and he pointed his finger again. Ka-Kot's 2 crisp sounds rang out, and 2 bolts of lightning appeared from the lightning lock, striking 2 of the azure pythons and killing them. The remaining 2 pythons quickly rushed towards Xiaohua, who was wrapping up the tail. When Xiaohua flew to the tail of the azure pythons, there were already 6 azure pythons chasing after him. Among them were the 2 azure pythons that were angered by Xiaohua just now. Unfortunately, Xiaohua did not have Cultivation's lightning trap pearl. When he saw the azure pythons spitting out poisonous mist, he knew that it was poison. However, there was no way to collect it, so he could only flash away, dodging the poisonous mist. Fortunately, the azure pythons had a limited amount of poison. After spitting a few times, they used their tails to attack. Xiaohua did not take out any magic tools, and only used his martial arts that seemed to be a light body technique. Twisting and turning in the shadows of the snake tails, he seemed to be the most relaxed. Seeing Xiaohua so frivolous, the 6 azure pythons became even more anxious, and their tails twitched even more vigorously. From time to time, they even used their stinking snake mouths to move closer, wanting to swallow Xiaohua in one bite. Junior brother Xiao, be careful. In the distance, Sun Shu saw that one azure python on his side was fleeing, and Qian Diheng's side was even worse. Unexpectedly, 2 pythons had also fled, and he couldn't help but hurriedly shout, "Damn it, if I don't show my power, you guys think I'm a sick cat?" Xiao Hua cursed, and with a clap of his hand, the cloud-suppressing seal flew out from his body. While countless amounts of heaven and earth spiritual qi poured into the cloud-suppressing seal, a yellow light scattered from the cloud-suppressing seal, covering the 9 azure pythons. Suddenly, the pressure of the magic treasure heavily hit the azure pythons. The azure pythons were suppressed to the point that they couldn't move, and the negative karma that came from the cloud-suppressing seal was like the nemesis of the heavens, causing the azure pythons to feel an irresistible fear. It was as if they were hibernating, dead still and motionless. "Junior brother Xiao, how come you didn't kill a single azure python?" Sun Shu asked curiously. "Hee, I don't know where to start." Xiao Hua giggled. "This python's skin is obviously a good thing. Wouldn't it be a pity if it was damaged? The azure python's 7 inches is the weakest, and killing the azure pythons is also done from there." Sun Shu covered his mouth and laughed. "Good." Xiao Hua nodded, and with a wave of his hand, the great wisdom sword appeared in his hand. Using the heavenly staff technique, a row of afterimages of the great wisdom sword streaked across, and in the blink of an eye, each of the 9 azure pythons had a fist-sized hole in their 7 inches. Seeing the snake blood gushing out, Sun Shu hurriedly waved his hand, and the thunder lock flew into the air and absorbed the snake blood. Xiao Hua rubbed his head and put away the cloud-suppressing seal, and said with a smile, "Junior brother doesn't have a magic treasure to collect the snake blood, and the poison from before is also a waste. And this azure python's poison is very powerful, and ordinary magic arts can't be used, and if you're not careful, you might even injure yourself, so you can only rely on magic treasures to collect it." Sun Shu nodded, thought for a moment, and clapped his hand, taking out a small jade bottle, and handed it over with a smile. "I said, this is a magic treasure that I used in my early years, called Yuning. It can collect and store water-like things, but because I received the Thunderlock from Master, I haven't used it for many years. If junior brother Xiao needs it, please accept it." Thank you, senior sister Sun." Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He took the Yuning and the refined jade slip and put it into his space. At the same time, he clapped his hand, took out the hemp dust, and handed it over with a smile. "Senior sister Sun, it's impolite to exchange gifts. This is junior brother's magic treasure, called hemp dust, an earth-type magic treasure. Junior brother is very comfortable with the cloud-suppressing seal, so I'll exchange this thing with senior sister." "That's not appropriate." A trace of disappointment flashed through Sun Shu's eyes, and she hurriedly waved his hand. "Although the cloud-suppressing seal is powerful, it's still a magic treasure. You're an aura-refining cultivator. How can the magic power in your body support the cloud-suppressing seal for a long time? I've also seen you use this hemp dust, and it's very powerful. If you give it to me, what will you use? Let's wait until you've advanced to the foundation establishment stage in the future, and after you've obtained a better magic treasure, then we'll talk about it again." Xiao Hua saw Sun Shu's resolute refusal and could only smile. "Since it's like this, junior brother will accept senior sister's kindness. In the future, when junior brother has any good magic treasure in his hands, junior brother will ask senior sister to speak, and junior brother will definitely give it to you." How can magic treasures be good? No matter what, it has to be a magic treasure. Sun Shu blinked and said. Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and said with a smile, "Senior sister is right. If it's not a magic treasure, junior brother will be too embarrassed to speak in the future." But these are all junior brother Zhao's methods? A cry of surprise came from afar, and that cry of surprise was very exaggerated. This person was naturally Qian Diheng, who had just finished dealing with the 2 green pythons. Of course, I didn't think that the incomparably strong, coarse skin and thick flesh of the green pythons would be so weak in junior brother Zhao's hands. Following that was Kun Fian's voice, and her voice really did contain traces of jealousy. She had tasted the green python's methods of breaking through with brute force, and the thunder-confining bead had been whipped by the green pythons several times and had lost quite a bit of her fa. Although she didn't see Xiaohua kill the green pythons, but looking at the 9 green pythons on the ground, she naturally knew that Xiaohua had easily killed them. Excuse me. Xiaohua rubbed his nose and said, let's first take care of these green pythons, then talk about it. Alright. Qian Diheng liked to harvest the most, and said with a smile, our methods of taking care of the green pythons are still not enough. Why don't we just directly divide these up, and if we can return to the Imperial Thunder Sect or some other gathering, we can let others take care of them. Chapter 1722. Qian Diheng's words were extremely true. Professional matters should be done by professional cultivators. Although Xiaohua knew how to refine pills, he didn't necessarily have to refine all the pills himself. Many pills could be traded with spirit stones. Moreover, Sun Shu and the other 2 roughly knew what materials could be used on the azure python's body. If it was damaged, wouldn't their efforts be wasted? According to the previous agreement, Xiaohua took an extra 20%. Everyone divided the green python's corpse, then looked at Xiaohua. Xiaohua rubbed his nose, sighed, and once again flew towards the area where the thick fog was. Like this, Xiaohua attracted another 40 to 50 azure pythons. However, the more he went, the more powerful the azure pythons were. Moreover, their numbers also seemed to have increased. Aside from Xiaohua using the cloud-suppressing seal to deter the group of pythons, Qian Diheng and the other 2 were somewhat powerless. On the 4th time, Xiaohua finally hit a snag. He actually attracted the attention of 3 Foundation Establishment green pythons. These 3 green pythons were different from the other green pythons. Their bodies were shockingly large, several hundred feet long. Moreover, on their enormous bodies, there were 4 palm-sized wings. These 3 green pythons flew in the air. Not only were they supported by a faint black mist, but when they flashed their wings, they weren't any worse than Xiaohua's usual flying technique. Seeing the 3 huge azure pythons, Xiaohua's first reaction wasn't fear. Instead, he thought of the little white dragon he met a long time ago at Yellow Flower Ridge. Sigh, Little White was also a python. Moreover, it was about to transform into a dragon, but it was killed by the heavenly tribulation. They are all pythons. Look at Little White, so cute. Why are these azure pythons more and more disgusting? Xiaohua saw the 3 azure pythons fly out from a hidden place and unconsciously curled his lips. At this moment, the 3 azure pythons seemed to have a tacit understanding. Among them, 2 of the huge pythons swayed their tails and flew behind Xiaohua, blocking Xiaohua's path. In addition to the previous one, these 3 azure pythons actually blocked him from 3 different directions in the mountain forest. These 3 azure pythons' intelligence is not low. Xiaohua was immediately shocked, and his heart was secretly on guard. Hiss! The 3 azure pythons hissed at the same time. A kind of aura similar to pressure came from the 3 azure pythons. Pressure. This is an azure python with the strength of a Foundation Establishment stage cultivator. Xiaohua was horrified. Although this kind of pressure from a high-level cultivator towards a low-level cultivator was not as skillful, it still caused Xiaohua to feel a burst of fear from the bottom of his heart. I'm afraid I'll have to try using the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiaohua didn't think of running away when facing the 3 green pythons. Instead, he coveted them. First, he clapped his hand, summoning out Jingqin. An earthen yellow light enveloped him from the top of his head. Then, Xiaohua's divine sense swept over, wanting to see which green python he should start with. Woo, 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 3 muffled sounds could be heard. The 3 green pythons opened their mouths at the same time. A green wind blade was formed from the 3 pythons' mouths, rapidly spinning as it flew towards Xiaohua. Oh my, it's not poisonous fog. Xiaohua was shocked again. His figure swayed and flew between the 3 green pythons, wanting to dodge the wind blade. How could he have known that the wind blade was condensed from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth? It was even more powerful than ordinary magic tools. Moreover, under the urging of the green python's divine sense, how could Xiaohua easily dodge it? After barely dodging a few times, a wind blade brushed past Xiaohua's back, breaking the defensive yellow talisman on Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua clenched his teeth. With a wave of his hand, he took out the great wisdom sword from the space. With a clap of his hand, the cloud-suppressing seal was once again raised in midair. Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal reveal the might of a magic tool, tumbling in midair, the three green pythons seemed to know how powerful it was. For the time being, they ignored Xiaohua and each spat out a wind blade to attack the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiaohua's eyes revealed a cold light. He formed a seal and poured his magic power into the cloud-suppressing seal. He pointed his finger, and the cloud-suppressing seal, carrying a bronze luster, smashed towards one of the green pythons. Woo woo woo! That green python spat out wind blades with all its might, continuously hitting the bottom of the cloud-suppressing seal. The other two green pythons also helped. A dozen wind blades actually stopped the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiaohua poured his magic power into it, but he was unable to smash it down for a moment. Watch this, young master! Xiaohua shouted loudly. His figure flew, and he quickly brandished the great wisdom sword, stabbing towards the nearest green python's vital point. Pop! A huge green shadow flashed by. This green python's tail was like a mountain as it smashed forward, blocking the front of the great wisdom sword. The scales on this green python's body were at least a foot long. When the great wisdom sword struck them, sparks flew. A fist-sized dent appeared on the scales. However, it was still unable to pierce through the scales. Hiss! That green python seemed to be in pain. When it hissed, the python's painful tail flipped again. With a bang, it hit the cloud-suppressing seal that was still tumbling in midair. The cloud-suppressing seal was tilted, as expected of Foundation establishment strength. Formidable. Xiaohua's eyes narrowed. Just as he was about to spit out the great wisdom sword, a cold and gloomy divine sense ruthlessly swept over from the distance. Not good, there's an even more formidable one. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed. These three green pythons with Foundation establishment cultivation were already too much for him to handle. If there was an even more formidable one, wouldn't it be even more difficult to escape? Xiaohua looked around. There were already many green pythons in the surroundings. Many of them were still flying back and forth in midair. However, because of the cloud-suppressing seal's might, they didn't dare to advance. Moreover, the sound of suso and the sound of breaking air became louder. There were even more green pythons rushing over. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly formed seals with his hands and dove into the ground, escaping underground. Just as Xiaohua's figure disappeared, a small snake that was much smaller than ordinary green pythons flew over from the distance like lightning. This small snake was also green in color. There were some strange runes on its body. Its 8 fleshy wings were separated on both sides of its body. Moreover, on the snake's head, there was a small sarcoma that faintly resembled a crown. That small snake had already appeared. The 3 green pythons immediately very obediently descended from midair. All the other green pythons that were flying in midair also descended and very respectfully prostrated themselves on the ground. Immediately after, from the place where the small snake flew over, more than 10 huge pythons that were several times larger than the previous 3 green pythons flew over and surrounded the small snake. The small snake slightly circled the ground where Xiaohua had dove into, then raised its head to look in the direction where Xiaohua had escaped. It hissed twice, then shook its small tail and flapped its 8 fleshy wings. An afterimage streaked across the sky and flew back into the depths of the mountain forest. Soon after, the group of huge pythons also gradually swam back into the thick fog like a tide. Extremely far away, Qian Diheng, who was flying in midair, had a pale face. As if he had seen a ghost, he howled, "Junior brother Xiao, what kind of spirit beast did you provoke? Just its divine sense was able to injure us?" Chapter 1723. Just as Xiaohua escaped from the ground far away, he did not dare to hesitate and called Sun Shu and the other 2 to flee. However, after a wave of divine sense swept over, the four of them simultaneously stopped in midair. Their Niwen palace felt as if it was pierced by a sharp excruciating pain. Xiaohua was slightly better. His divine sense was not in his Niwen palace, but in the Buddha Saraira's Niwen palace. A burst of golden light flowed from the Buddha Saraira, blocking the pain by quite a bit. However, it still caused Xiaohua to fall by more than a foot. Qian Diheng and the other two were in an even more sorry state. Each of them fell by more than 3 to 4 zhang. Furthermore, the four of them were all pale. It was obvious that their divine sense was heavily injured. Qian Diheng naturally could not help but cry out. However, the four of them did not dare to stay any longer. Each of them endured the pain of their divine sense and activated their magic power. Only after flying a few hundred li in one breath did Qian Diheng dare to speak. "Big brother, do you think I wanted to?" Xiaohua took a deep breath and tried his best to operate the exquisite leaf scripture, wanting to reduce the pain of his divine sense. He bitterly smiled and said, "Little brother only wanted to attract a few green pythons." Who would have thought that it would actually attract 3 green pythons of Foundation Establishment Cultivation? Foundation Establishment Cultivation? Sun Shu's face was also pale. However, this paleness had a few traces of redness, adding a few points to her beauty. That's not too possible, right? Green pythons are only first-rank spiritual beasts. What is there to be suspicious about, Senior Sun? Xiaohua said. Little brother's cloud-suppressing seal was almost unable to smash it down. Furthermore, from the green python's bodies, there was an aura similar to that of Foundation Establishment cultivators. The thing that damaged our divine sense shouldn't be these 3 green pythons of Foundation Establishment Cultivation, right? Kun Fian bit his lips and said, "It shouldn't be. However, little brother doesn't know if it's the green pythons." Xiaohua nodded and said, "Little brother even wanted to kill a Foundation Establishment green python. Who would have thought that before I even made a move, this divine sense appeared? Little brother knew that I was not its opponent and hurriedly escaped. Now, I feel that I was really lucky. If not for little brother's alertness, or if the divine sense attack came too late, little brother is afraid that little brother would not be able to escape. Could it be that the green python in the Liqin mountain range has mutated?" Qian Diheng asked curiously. Even if it's the green python king, it said that its cultivation base is only at the early stage of Foundation Establishment. How could it possibly have the means to attack with divine sense? That must be the case. Little brother only saw a dozen or so green pythons at the early Foundation Establishment stage. Could it be that they are all green python kings? Xiaohua said fiercely. "Junior brother Xiao, you've worked hard." Sun Shu looked at Xiaohua with watery eyes. "Our miscalculation put junior martial brother Xiao in a dangerous situation. If it weren't for junior martial brother's incredible speed, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to return to the mountain and answer to martial uncle helplessness." With that, he slapped his hand and took out his bag of holding. "This azure python. I'll give junior brother another 20%. Senior sister Sun said it very well. This brother will also let junior brother Xiao have a few." Qian Diheng grinned and said, "Thop thop thop." Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand. Looking at the 3 people, he felt warm in his heart. Little brother took a lot just now. If I take too much of this thing, it won't be of much use. Little brother is inexperienced. Coming out with you all, I'm happy to be able to help senior brother and senior sister a little. If senior sisters and senior brothers feel that you owe little brother anything, just think of little brother first if there's any good things in the future. All right. Qian Diheng smiled. "We could have returned the favor by taking some stinky snakes, but you suddenly raised it so high. Forget it. Who asked junior martial brother Xiao to be so benevolent? If there's any good things in the future, this brother will think of you first." Many thanks senior brother Qian." Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, "Forget it, we also agree." Sun Shu glanced at Kun Fian and said at the same time, "Right, little brother has a question now." Xiaohua smiled. "This divine sense attack method, does our Imperial Thunder sect have it?" "My Heavenly Thunder Palace has it," Qian Diheng replied. However, it said that it's a technique used by Golden Core stage seniors. Moreover, only seniors with exceptionally strong divine senses can use it. Yes, my heavenly thunder palace also seems to have it. Kuan Fian continued. However, it doesn't seem to be as strong as that divine sense just now. If that divine sense was the Green Python King's, it should be a spiritual beast's innate ability. Naturally, it's stronger than us cultivators who forcibly cultivate it. Sun Shu explained. If Junior Martial Brother Xiao is interested in this, you can look for it in the Dawn Rain continent. This kind of technique is extremely rare. Just relying on the Imperial Thunder sect, I'm afraid it's hard to get it. Hee, isn't that enough? Senior brothers and sisters, if you come across this kind of technique, the first person you think of is little brother? Xiaohua smiled. AI, you're thinking too much. Qian Diheng said without any trace of politeness. This brother still wants to cultivate it. Can't you just let little brother take a look? Xiaohua said pitifully. No, of course not. Oh. Qian Diheng laughed loudly. His body suddenly swayed, and he hugged his head with both hands, almost falling from midair again. Sun Shu smiled bitterly. This divine sense isn't easy to recover. Let's hurry ahead and find a secluded place to rest for a few days first. 10 days later, Xiaohua and the other 3 flew out from the hidden place. They found a new direction and passed through the edge of the Liqian mountain range, rushing to Jiangqing City. This time, even the most curious and least afraid Qian Diheng was a lot more well-behaved. He didn't want to stir up trouble and get any benefits. Qian Diheng originally thought that his cultivation was the worst, but after all, he had a magic treasure to protect himself. Moreover, he had a new halberd. Even if he couldn't attack, he could at least protect himself, right? However, the spiritual beast's innate ability was so powerful that it could directly attack divine senses, making it impossible to guard against. If a first-grade spiritual beast was already like this, then what about second- and third-grade spiritual beasts? Keeping one's tail between one's legs and honestly protecting one's life, then looking for an opportunity to build a foundation was the right way. Of course, the Liqian mountain range was definitely not a good place. Although Xiaohua and the others were more careful, they still bumped into a few second-grade spiritual beasts. For example, the 3-winged frost ladybug, a fist-sized second-grade spiritual beast that looked no different from an ordinary ladybug. Xiaohua and the others threw out a lot of fireball talismans to escape. Fortunately, there was only one 3-winged frost ladybug. If there was a group of them like the green python, the 4 of them would cry to the heavens and the earth. When the 4 of them flew out of the range of the Liqian mountain range, they were already in a sorry state. When their divine senses swept over and saw that there were already people in front of them, they were greatly relieved. Senior Sister Sun, if I remember correctly, we should be at Mingcue Mountain in 10 days. Jiangqing City is about 1,000 miles to the west of Mingcue Mountain. Qian Diheng said with a smile. Sun Shu pursed her lips and smiled. Exactly. There is no teleportation formation from here to Jiangqing City. We still have to fly for 10 days. Calculating the time, it should be about time. Let's rest while we fly. That's the way it should be. Kuan Fian also said. Along the way, there are signs of human habitation. Other than the people of the secular world, there are also some small cultivation families. It's not worth mentioning. Only Mingcue Mountain's Ling Pei mountain range has some fame. It's a side courtyard of the Lan Li sect. By the time we get there, we'll have already recovered. Mingcue Mountain? Xiaohua frowned slightly. He seemed to have heard this name from somewhere before, but when he thought about it carefully, he couldn't remember. When Kuan Fian mentioned the Lan Li sect, Xiaohua suddenly realized that this Lan Li sect's name should be something he heard people mention in Jinghua City. It was when he entered Jinghua City that a cultivator directly flew over his head. Some people said that it was the Lan Li sect's 3rd elder, called Reverend Zhuoming, who was said to be a mid-Yuanying stage cultivator. And, since he thought of this, Xiaohua thought of the origin of Mingcue Mountain. Of course, it was Shi Wuming, who half-gifted and half-sold him the Devil Spear Point. Shi Wuming claimed to be a cultivator from Mingcue Mountain. When he took Xiaohua's storage pouch, he even said that Xiaohua could use his name to do something for him. Although it wasn't that long ago, Xiaohua was now a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect, and his cultivation level was comparable to the early stage of the Foundation establishment stage. He had long cast this matter aside. If it weren't for Mingcue Mountain and Jinghua City, Xiaohua wouldn't have remembered it. Could it be that we'll meet Senior Shi again? Xiaohua thought of that strange cultivator and felt a trace of gratitude in his heart. That devil spear point had saved Xiaohua's life many times in the past. It was only after he obtained the devil hammer that he stopped using it. Let's go. It's basically safe in front of us. We just need to pay attention to cover our tracks. Qian Diheng began to speak carelessly again. Thus, Xiaohua and the other three put on their camouflage cloaks and flew southwest using their flying technique. They didn't speak a word along the way. On the 9th day, they saw a vast expanse of green in front of them. It was actually a boundless grassland. On the grassland, there were many shepherds, riding horses of various colors, herding flocks of sheep that looked like white clouds. Occasionally, there would be a few columns of smoke rising into the sky. It was quite the scenery outside the Great Wall. Looking into the distance, in the depths of the grassland, there was an extremely tall emerald green mountain, like a piece of jade growing in the water. Needless to say, that should be Mingcue Mountain. After flying into the grassland and seeing Mingcue Mountain, Xiaohua and the others flew slightly to the west. On the evening of the 10th day, in the depths of the grassland, a small town with a radius of dozens of miles appeared. This small town looked somewhat dilapidated. It was surrounded by dilapidated mud walls, as if it was built as a city wall. However, after a long time, it was inevitable that some of it would collapse and some of it would be broken down. The inside and outside of the mud walls were a little spacious. There were some tent-like buildings piled up in the surroundings. These tents were seen many times in the grassland. They should have been built by the residents of the small town. Looking further into the small town, there were some commonly seen buildings, some small buildings, some small courtyards, and some continuous ordinary houses. Moreover, the styles of these buildings were clearly different. It seemed that people from all over the place had gathered here. We'll go down. Sun Shu's divine sense swept over and waved his hand. The four of them landed not far from Jiangqing town. They are tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.